We don't have a free will choice as to how those things work. Once we come into the matrix and agree to do that, once we come into the time matrix and decide to be part of the space-time hologram, we've agreed to adopt those basic rules. So in that sense, we've given that part of our free will over to the privilege of having the experience in the time matrix. Now, within that framework of free will, within a greater framework of fixed, let's say, predestination, there are options available to us. They're called probable realities. That means there are, from any moment point, there are at least several, sometimes many, many, different courses of action that can evolve from that point. Because time is simultaneous and space occurs all in the same place, we will see one version of the possibilities of a choice or an event, but every other version will be experienced very often by a part of ourselves. The process of coming together, of reclaiming your consciousness as an avatar, is bringing together all of those probable selves, the pieces of yourself that followed this idea or that train of development. There are parts of ourselves now that are part of various different reality systems that are intimately connected to this one, probable versions of this space-time frame that have a probable version of history. The history that we have, that we're vibrationally connected to from our moment point, was created by a certain series of choices on a mass level, on a race level. It's called race karma, if you want to look at it that way. Race and planetary karma. There's also a galactic level of karma and a universal level of karma. Karma is really the accumulation of our choices. It determines what set of probabilities we as an individual will see. When we get home and are completely out of the matrix, we've experienced all of them because we pull all of our parts together. Now, within this field of probable action, probable choice, and probable realities, there is one version that contains all the others. It's called the heroic probability. In terms of a small self, you could look at it as the self that's going to be the one that accretes or pulls together all the others. It'll be the self that all the others will experience, let's say, their body death point or their body ascension point, and they will merge with the consciousness of the heroic probable self. There are probable selves for planets and for galaxies and for universes. So there are heroic selves for each of those levels. Right now, in our time continuum, we are encountering the heroic version of our planetary and galactic karmic or choice pattern. We are in the probability where something called the final conflict drama is beginning to unfold. Now, this has been a probability or a possibility that we would see ever since the Atlantean period that I speak about. That Atlantean period, you could say, ended in 9558 BC, but it began very long ago. It began here with the first seeding, which was 250 million years ago on this planet. There were two, actually that was parallel Earth, 250 million years ago. 25 million years ago, seeding one took place here, where the angelic human race was put here for the first time. It was destroyed by something called the Electric Wars 5.5 million years ago. Then there was a second seeding. They were destroyed by a very long-term war that was called the Thousand Years' War. And then there was something called the Treaty of El Anu that was formed. It was an agreement between some of the fallen Anu Elohim races and the Emerald Covenant races, the Christos Founders races, that they would attempt for the third seeding, that they would stop warring with us and they would attempt for the third seeding to do bioregenesis for their races. The third seeding of our angelic human lineage began with the creation of the halls of Amenti Stargates. It began with the creation of the Ark of the Covenant, which was part of the Amenti Stargate system. The Amenti Stargate system began being built much earlier. It began being built in 560 million 50 million years ago, when the whole drama of warring with the Anu Elohim from Tara in density 2 came down to density 1. Progressively, more of the halls of Amenti structure were put in from that period. And for the third seeding, because there had been so much damage done to the planet between the electric wars of the first seeding and the Thousand Years Wars of the second seeding, there was another, let's say, bypass. It's almost like a heart bypass, where you're bypassing the arteries that no longer work. They created the Ark of the Covenant, which was how our third seeding races were seeded onto this planet. When you come through stargates to get into a planet, it implies that your template takes upon the coding. It takes on the coding, the mathematical coding of the stargates you come through. The Ark of the Covenant comes through from D12, which in our universal system is a place called Lyra Aramatana. That's our divine blueprint. And instead of going 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, like would be the normal case, so you get all of the coding, it goes from D12 to D9, which is Merak Andromeda, to D6, which is Sirius B. Then it crosses over through D5, which is Terra, or Alcyone in the Pleiades. Then over to D4, which is our solar gate, and down into D3, which is the Earth gate. So we have the coding of the Ark of the Covenant contained within us. The Ark of the Covenant wasn't a big gold box that people were chasing around, but that was a little, let's say, sleight of hand that the Jehovian Anunnaki created in order to, let's say, divert attention after the Atlantean drama. So any recollection of things like Ark of the Covenant would have other meanings, so the races would never remember. Now, we're in a probability where, because of a set of choices that have been made through Atlantis from the period of, let's say, 50,000 BC up to 9,558 BC, that put us on a course of action that got us nearer and nearer to the heroic probability. But the heroic probability had the greatest potential of fulfillment, because it had the potential for fulfillment of the divine blueprint of this planetary system and this galactic system after literally 250 billion years of warring and having this system ripped apart. So it held the greatest potential victory, but it also had the greatest potential intensity as far as what the drama would look like. It wasn't known until literally the year 2000 whether or not this drama would be fulfilled during this period of time. We could have taken another probable version and waited about 2,000 years before we had to finish this. And by then maybe the Anunnaki races and the Anu Elohim races and the Draconian races might have been more, let's say, matured. Doubtful, but it's possible. It would have given them 2,000 more years to decide whether they wanted to play fair and whether they wanted to end up on the Christos side of the time matrix when the matrices were separated from each other. In the year 2000, some wonderful things happened that changed and locked us into our heroic probability. When we were able to anchor D12 frequency here for the first time since 208,216 BC, the fact that we had the D12 frequency available meant that the final conflict drama, the stargates would open, which meant the final conflict drama would unfold. Now this drama is so large that from our perspective here, it can seem overwhelming at first. That's why they've given it to us in pieces. For the last 2 years, we've been getting pieces of the history so we could understand one piece and then see where that piece fit into the next. There's a very long history here that has to do with Metatronics, and it has to do with a being called Metatron, and it has to do with the Anu Elohim. If we can understand the place that we exist within right now without letting it freak us out, just overwhelm us to where we want to go hide and believe in anything except this because it's too big and too scary and too much in the drama to deal with. If we can just face it and say, boy, that's interesting, didn't teach that in high school. We can stay in our power during this. Right now, we're on a planet where most of the people are what we call sleepers. They're going to stay that way in this cycle. There's not enough time, and the drama has gone too far, too fast, for them to have time to sufficiently wake up and begin to understand these things. There are so many people that are absolutely addicted to dogmas because they've been told that's the way it is. Their generations before them have been told that's the way it is. They find their race identity through identifying themselves with any particular dogma. There are people in these regions that identify with the Olympian god dramas and all of that. There are the Christians that identify with the Christian dogmas. There are the Muslims that identify with the Muslim dramas, etc., etc., etc. If people could step beyond the dogmas and look for what the dogmas were originally intended to lead them toward, they would begin to look inside themselves. but their dogmas have taught them to be afraid of themselves. They've taught them that their God is outside and that they have to grovel in order to even get audience with that God. That's an illness. It's an illness like a virus that was given. That virus takes a while to cure, just like a computer virus. You can't just push a button and it's gone. Sometimes you really have to heal that program before the virus goes away. The races on the planet now are in no way prepared to hear the things that you're listening to now. But there are some, like you, that catch a little bit of information here or there and it resonates. Say, I want to find out more about that. You guys are the courageous ones. You want to know. You don't care what book you have to throw in the trash. You want to know what the truth is because you have a feeling for connection to God. You have a feeling that came with you in this lifetime and in many others, and that's feeling that guided you. You wouldn't have that feeling if you didn't have some degree of a Christos spark at birth. That means even if you started out as an Illuminati race person in one of the earlier dramas, you have managed to bring enough of the bioregenesis into the DNA where you have at least some of the 12 subharmonics and some of the strands, or you wouldn't relate to this material at all. It would completely turn you off and you probably hate the messenger, like a lot of people out there do. Now, when we get into Metatronics, Metatron, who is Metatron? Where'd that word come from? Metatron is the name of a family collective. It's a family collective out of an entity. Now, an entity is something above a rishi, the first level of ascended masters, consciousness collective. There's an entity called Giovanni. Giovanni was an entity in good standing, as most entities are. Giovanni was part of the collective that created the Christos founders races that seeded this time matrix 950 billion years ago. It was the groups of Elohim that were commissioned to Stargate 11, which was Avion in Lyra. They were commissioned as the guardians, the Christos founders guardians of Stargate 11, that became convoluted, code convoluted, which began their downfall, both genetically, template-wise, and of consciousness. That particular group were out of the entity called Giovanni. Because of the fall that took place, the genetic fall and the creation of the black hole that I'll talk about in a minute, it was created 250 billion years ago. The entity Giovanni fell because there's a law of physics that applies. If you are an ascended master being, you have your pieces up there, your parts of self stationed out of the time matrix. You send in X amount of energy of yourself into the matrix. If you sent in, and most don't, but on occasion, as an ascended master collective will send in more than a natural proportion of its energy into the matrix, say for a salvage mission. If the salvage team you sent in goes down too, it takes the whole collective down. So there was an entity that fell as a result of what took place 250 billion years ago. 250 billion years ago in Lyra, there was something called the, oh boy, what did that do?
Somebody doesn't like.
They're called the Lyran Elohim
I
Wars.
just brought you to show you that we're having some technical difficulties.
I think Metatron's a little upset, probably.
However, we have team members at reception, so they're trying to sort it out.
Are they coming out all right? What did it do?
Well, it's because they have two machines.
Yeah.
One that they use for this, which has got the cartridge that expired.
Oh.
So they tried it through the other one that does have a cartridge, but it didn't like this very much, as you can see. I checked whether people had had dinner already, and they said they had, so...
Well, I trust that somehow...
They're trying to find another cartridge for the machine right now.
Okay.
And they might have one.
Will it even do a paper copy?
Oh, we got paper copies, yeah.
Oh, that's good. So, like, in dire straits, if it keeps doing that to the plastics, we can at least pass a paper copy around. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway. Hello, Metatron. 250 billion years ago, an event took place in the Lyra star system, the cradle of Lyra, with the Christos Founders races, the races from Stargate 11, the Guardians of Avion Gate 11, and the Guardians of Gate 10, which is Vega Lyra, began to war with each other because both of them suffered code convolution. The Omicron Draconian races, who were of the Seraphi Seraphim, were the Gate 10 Guardians, and a particular group out of the Giovanni entity of Elohim were the Guardians of Gate 11. Both of them were getting a bit out of hand as far as taking a free will concept and literally turning it in on itself and becoming authoritarian. Because free will and authoritarian dictatorship do not go hand in hand. They are in direct opposition. Both of them began to play that game with each other. And after a while of the D11 Elohim pushing the Draconians around, the Draconians managed to evolve in a certain way that they were a bit stronger. So they began to take back territory. They began to push back. And at this point, the Elohim commissioned High Council, which were the ones who were guardians, the Elohim, the Elohai Elohim, who were guardians of Gate 12, and they said, these guys are out of control. We want you to destroy them. And we said, excuse me, we don't destroy anybody. By the way, did you notice that you've been out of control for a while, too? Why don't we all sit down and figure out how we can help both of you heal? They didn't like that answer. They threatened High Council that if you don't destroy them, we'll destroy them. And not only that, we will destroy your gate and you as well, and we will take over the Matrix. That was a very sick decision to make. It was a choice that was made because they had an idea. These were Creator God people. These were Elohim that knew just almost as much as the other Elohim. They knew that if Source could create using the template that we talked about yesterday in the Dance Floor programs, where you have 15 spheres, well, what if you took just 7? They knew there was a way to bend the mathematics, which would bend the light and the sound and the scalar waves into a form that could actually repel itself and cut itself off from the natural matrix. It would still exist within the entire matrix, but it would be their own system. They decided they wanted to turn this time matrix into that, which was a direct violation of something called the Emerald Covenant. The Emerald Covenant was the original agreement that the Janus Ascended Masters agreed upon when they decided to create this time matrix together. It was a free will system, and it was built upon the law of one, which is acknowledgement that we are all of the same source, and that loving co-creation is the only sane and natural way of being in an understanding of yourself as part of the one. That was the original tenets and precepts by which this matrix was created. The Elohim of Gate 11 decided that they were going to do it different. They were going to break that covenant, and they were going to destroy the races who wouldn't cooperate with them, and they were going to take it over and run it their way. The only thing standing in their way of doing that were the Elohai Elohim of Gate 12. They could dominate the things lower in coding than them. They could, when push came to shove, use their ability to run higher frequency because they had the D11 coding. The Seraphi Seraphim had D10 coding. So they could, if they wanted to, use that superiority and ability to run frequency to get rid of the Draconian races. But they would have a hard time doing it to get rid of the Elohai Elohim races because they had D12 and higher capacity. But there is a way to turn the natural physics of creation in on itself. If you can think of the Cathara grid and the Stargate systems as a conduit of energy, and when energy is coming into the matrix, it spirals down through the primal light and sound fields into D12 and then D11, 10, 9, 8. Now, if you block energy at Gate 11, the energy is still coming in through 12, but it bounces back. And it creates a backflow that amplifies. So you can, and it was theoretic at that point, theoretically, you could sever the connection at Gate 12 and have Gate 11 and down be your own little universe if you wanted to hijack it. That was their idea. It worked. And there was a choice that the Elohai made. There was a choice to defend or to allow. Now the Elohai knew that they were eternal. Death isn't something that frightened them. They were completely beyond that. They knew that if they were to defend themselves, because they had superior power capacity, that those who attempted to destroy them would literally have the energy bounce back at themselves and literally wipe them out and the systems they were connected to. It would not only take out the Elohim that were posing the challenge, it would take out the Seraphim, both the fallen ones, and a group called the Odedikron. The Odedikron were a race of Seraphim who had co-governance over Stargate 10, Vega, with the Omicron Draconians. The Odedikrons were the reptilians. There was a difference between the Draconians and the reptilians. The Draconians were the dragon moth people. They were the dinoids. They created dinosaur-like, as opposed to snake-like, as opposed to smaller reptilian. The Omicron dragon moth dinoids were fully involved in the competition for the time matrix. They knew what the Elohim were going to do, and they decided they would do it too. They didn't petition for help. They said, fine, we'll both get rid of them, and then we'll go after each other and see who gets the matrix. But the Odedikron, the reptilians, didn't want to play the game. They were stuck in the Gate 10 system, and they petitioned for help. But because you had Gate 11 and the Elohim in the middle, in between Gate 12 and Gate 10, we weren't able to rescue or get the Odedikron out. So if the decision to defend by simply putting up a shield around Gate 12 was chosen, it would have taken out both Gate 11 and Gate 10, which could have been repaired. It would have taken a long time, but it could have been repaired using Gate 12. But those consciousness that were in those systems would be fragmented back to space dust. They'd still be part of God, as I've said. You can never be not part of God. But races that had beautiful potential, and they'd already come a long way in their evolution. They'd evolved from 950 billion years ago to 250 billion years ago. That's a lot of evolution. And they had reached wondrous things in their own right in certain ways. It was primarily because of the Odedikron, of the reptilians, that the founders chose to allow, knowing they were taking a burden onto themselves. But it was the only way that if they allowed it, they would slowly be able to heal it. They knew a black hole would be created if this were allowed. They tried to talk them out of it, but they didn't want to listen. The Elohim did not want to listen. Instead of defending themselves, they allowed the Elohim to back up Gate 11 and reverse it. And that created a backflow, and it literally shattered the divine blueprint and blew up the stargates in Lyra Aramitana. That would have to be reassembled later using the D13 and higher primal light fields to reset the pattern. It created a black hole system. That black hole system came to be known as Phantom Matrix. Phantom Matrix was originally a part of this time matrix. Phantom Matrix started with simply part of the D11 Avion gate and what was that planetary system or star system, and the D10 Vega Lyra system. But it grew much bigger than was ever intended. When the Phantom Matrix was created by the Anu Elohim, they came to call themselves the Anu Elohim. The Giovanni entity hadn't fully fallen. A portion of that entity had fallen. And because of that, it sent another portion of itself into the matrix to try to rescue the part of itself that had fallen. That was a risky thing to do because, again, it comes down to how much energy is on which side. Normally, an entity would put X amount of itself into the matrix at one time. Well, it already lost a big chunk of itself, so it put more of itself in. And there was a chance that was taken. If that part ended up getting distorted also and wasn't strong enough to pull the others back out, it would make more critical mass of reversed mess in the matrix than what the collective had itself, the Ascended Master Collective had itself. And that is what happened, but it happened in stages. when the original fall happened, the original sin, when Stargate 11 blew up 250 billion years ago, and Phantom Matrix was created, there were precautionary things put in motion, knowing that it was going to occur. There was something called the Eye of Brahman that was created at D12.5. Now that was a little bit beyond the D12 Stargate. The Eye of Brahman was a polarization refraction lens that would allow the primal light fields from the natural to this time matrix to refract through and literally anchor into the Phantom Matrix, to hold it, to give it a structure so it could begin to restructure itself instead of going completely back to space dust. Because what happens when a black hole is created? A template is shattered like a crystal that's crushed with a hammer. It gets twisted, the energy gets twisted and reversed, but if it has any portion of its template that has enough frequency, it can begin to accrete again. What usually happens in a black hole system is it accretes like to like frequency, but it's missing pieces, and it isn't able to accrete functionally. So it accretes on a distorted template compared to its original mathematics. The Eye of Brahman was intended to allow the pattern of the natural template of this time matrix to be put back in to Phantom Matrix. So when it began to reaccrete itself and the consciousness began to pull itself together, it would still have, eventually, after it accreted enough, it would have access to getting plugged back in to its original divine blueprint. That was the original intention. So there was a lens, the first eye, the Eye of Brahman, created. And it was created by the Christos founders and the Janus Ascended Masters races in order to give the beings that would be caught in the black hole system an opportunity to re-evolve instead of being, blown back to space dust. And again, it was done primarily because you had several innocent races, but primarily the Odedicron, who had been persecuted by the Draconian races progressively more and more. There was no way they could get out of the system, and they had always been in good standing with the Christos founders races. So there was a commitment made on behalf of them, but also on behalf of the others, because even though the Anu Elohim had gone off on their own tangent and become very dangerous creator gods, they had become anti-creator gods, anti-Christic creator gods, they were still loved, and there was still if there's life, there's hope, hopefully, So it was a decision of love, but it was a decision of accepting, out of love, accepting a huge, massive responsibility. The responsibility of knowing how dangerous this healing experiment could be. Because if it went wrong, if it went bad, it could not only take down this whole matrix, but if it did, that would allow it to have enough frequency where it could begin to poke holes into other time matrices as well. It wasn't a decision that was made by a couple of people. It was a decision that was made through the Ascended Masters Janus councils of various different time matrices that could be directly affected if it went wrong and if it went bad. There was a whole lot of them that didn't want it tried. But there was enough, and it came down to a vote. And it came down to some of the older time matrices that were much older than 950 billion years old, had been through something similar to this long time before, and it didn't work. I said, okay, you guys have a good idea, sweet children. You really, really, really want to try it now. You've looked at what could happen. The outcome, if it's successful, we will look up to you because we tried a similar thing when a similar thing happened in our matrices. But it didn't work, and it created absolute havoc. We would have liked for it to work. So, because we would like to know where we went wrong, maybe you can do it better. And if you're willing to take responsibility, that means you don't get out of there. If it goes bad, you stay in there until you fix it, right? So it doesn't hurt anything else. So the creator gods, the Anu Elohim and the Seraphai Seraphim and the Brahmarama races that were the original 3 Christos founders races of this matrix, and their Janus Ascendant Masters collective said, yeah, we want to try. So the permission was given for us to try. And that's why the Eye of Brahman was allowed to be set up. So the phantom matrix wouldn't just go back into implosion within itself. Because when a system goes into black hole and it begins to accrete, it will accrete to a certain point where it begins to literally pull energy from itself, because it pulls all its pieces together and it has nothing left to do but continue to pull. And it pulls itself into compaction. And it goes into what's called molecular compaction or atomic compaction, and it implodes on itself. It has to do with magnetic and electrical fields. So, by setting up the Eye of Brahman, there was an opportunity being made where the black hole would accrete, but at a certain point in its accretion, it would reach enough frequency in reverse that it could possibly be plugged in to the D13 primal light fields so it could be brought back around. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try, at least so we thought at the time. Well, when this occurred, one of the big heroes in the drama was going to be Giovanni. Giovanni wanted to make sure, because Giovanni felt responsible, because it was Giovanni's family that had created the fallen Anu Elohim. There's a particular collective of the Giovanni family, like a smaller family within a family, that was called Metatron. Metatron, at a certain point, became directly involved. Now the Eye of Brahma was set up 250 billion years ago in preparation for, it was actually set up before they did the final blowing up of Stargate 12. That's when the decision to allow was given. Once the Stargate blew up, the Eye of Brahman activated, and it began to hold the phantom matrix from totally going into reversal, where it dropped so low in frequency that you couldn't plug into it anymore. And there was a degree of successful evolution between 250 billion years ago and 150 billion years ago. We got a lot of the Odetocron races out, and even some of the fallen Anu Elohim and fallen Draconian races were able to do bioregenesis and get back out into the natural matrix. There was a problem that was manifesting itself in relation to some of the Anu Elohim that were being rehabilitated, the ones that had been out of the Metatron Giovanni collective. You could get them out to about D11, and then they were what's called host matrix, because they didn't have the D12 frequency anymore. They were hosted into another collective of the Brahmarama races. So you ended up with a hybrid, because the Brahmarama races had the lowest frequency of the Christos founders races. So the Anu Elohim had the second highest before. They couldn't plug into their own matrix, so they were hosted through the Brahmarama races. But they still held a mentality, even after they would undergo hosting, of dictatorial type governance. Their distortions had gone so deep, and because they still didn't have a full D12 pattern back. At D12, you start to get something. You start to get it consciously. You start to feel it. We are all one. That means I am you and you are me. That means I treat you the way I would want to be treated. That means we cooperate and not fight. Without the full D12 pattern, that cognition cannot fully come in. So they still didn't have that cognition. They began to pose a danger to, even when they'd be hosted out, they were posing a danger to the Brahmarama races. So there was another decision made, and this is where Metatron came in full force. There was another lens put in, another polarization refraction lens. The original one stayed, the Brahmarama, or the Brahman, the Eye of Brahman stayed. That was to hold phantom matrix intact. This other lens, that was called the Eye of Yahweh, or Yod-He-Vod-He, was put in. It was the Metatronic eye. It was put in to allow a, shortcut. So the races, the fallen Anu Elohim races, because they were still posing a danger, where they could do a shortcut, they didn't have to make it all the way up to D12, they could do a shortcut into another matrix that was actually more authoritarian. It was not a matrix that was originally created on a free will system. It was a healing matrix, almost like how you look at our, perhaps our prisons for violent criminal type people. And it was agreed, the Metatron and the Giovanni entity agreed that their races needed rehabilitation, more strict rehabilitation. They were still not capable of functioning fairly in a free will system. They would abuse if they were given power. And because of that, the Metatron collective created, and were permitted to create, the Eye of Metatron, or the Eye of Yahweh. They're one and the same. This lens was supposed to, it was positioned at D11.5, which is between gate 11 and gate 12. All right, so it wasn't as high up in frequency as the Eye of Brahman. And it was they would be able to evolve and get that mathematical coding, and then it would take them over into another matrix system. And it was actually another black hole system that had made some progress. It was the original one from way back that the other time matrices, the other Janus Ascendant Masters had said, well, we tried and it didn't work. Right. They were still trying to heal and rehab that one, and there were certain portions of it that were rehabbing. They were partially successful. So it was decided by the Metatron entity and its Giovanni collective and the Ascended Masters collectives that the ones that were causing problems, they could, for the Brahmarama races, would be hosted out into this matrix where they could finish their evolution there. All right. This was originally supposed to be an evolutionary shortcut, because in certain terms, if they were successful there, it would take them less time to evolve back into full ascended mastery than if they stayed here to fully regenerate the Christos template. There were certain perks for them to go. It was originally called the Path of Arimathea. It had to do with a planet or a star called Arimathzus that was part of this matrix. Now, Arimathzus, at the time that these decisions were made to allow the Eye of Metatron to be put in, Arimathzus was kind of like a crown jewel in that particular fallen matrix, because it was beginning to get its D11.5 frequencies back, where it was this close to being able to go back into being reversed to a D12 natural pattern. So there was this chance taken by putting in the Metatronic Eye, or the Eye of Yahweh, that would create a link between that system. It was supposed to be a one-way link. You could go this way, but they could not come this way. All right, that was to protect this matrix. It didn't link into this matrix. It linked into Phantom, and Phantom linked into here. Well, large numbers of the fallen Anu Elohim did evolve out via the Eye of Metatron, or the Eye of Yahweh. And then a problem happened over in Aramat. We call it Aramat for short. In Arimathzus, the new influx of the still semi-distorted consciousness from this matrix got together with the distorted consciousness from other systems in that matrix and invited them up to Arimathzus. And together they took over Arimathzus. And this created a situation for the Giovanni Metatron family. They were losing some of the guardian ones that they had sent in to assist had actually gone into the Phantom Matrix and escorted the others out into the other matrix. And when there were rebellions over in their system, it was called the Wisadek system, when there was rebellion in the Wisadek system, the guardian races sent by Metatron and sent by Giovanni were also overtaken, and their consciousness was entrapped. There are certain ways you can entrap a being in a body, and we'll get into this in a little bit. It has to do with creating an electrostatic body as opposed to an electrodynamic body. An electrodynamic body allows frequency to move freely through. An electrostatic body keeps it circulating, where it just circulates within itself and it blocks the currents. There were particular genetic experiments done, and also planetary grid experiments and galactic grid experiments done in the Wisadek matrix that created a situation where about 89% of the energy of Giovanni Metatron was literally put into reversal. And when that happens, it creates like a black hole pulling on the Ascendant Master Collective itself. And there was a choice made by that matrix to either sever its connection completely to those of itself that it had lost. What this meant was it was going to fall. One way or another, it was going to fall. Because if you can't hold enough frequency to stay in resonance with the primal light and sound fields, with the primal sound fields especially, where the Ascended Master levels are, that means you're coming into the matrix whether you want to or not. All right? If you lose a certain percentage, as an Ascended Master, if you lose a certain percentage of your consciousness, because it's embodied in things that fall, they will pull you in. And the Metatron Giovanni Collective realized it was going to go in. It could have maintained itself at a D12 level and began its evolution from there. It would have had a big chore in its hands. It would have had to sever, first of all, its connection to its parts that were in the Wysadek matrix. And then it would have had to progressively accrete frequency until it could host out. It would have to host out, and it would become kind of like a baby Ascended Master Collective again, instead of a very old-time collective. The collective made a decision, and it was the collective, the Metatron Collective of the Giovanni Collective. They made a decision that they would do their fall in a certain way. They started to have, you can almost look at it as a virus. The parts of themselves that had fallen were still in communication electronically with the collective. Now, the ones that were in the matrix didn't know it, but every little thought that the fallen ones felt, its Ascended Master Collective felt, and it began to take on the same attitudes. And one of the biggest and worst attitudes, and it's still a virus in this time matrix, is the attitude of blame. The Metatron entity, the Giovanni Metatron entity, decided to blame the other Ascended Master Collectives for its fall. It was reminded that it agreed to do this. It was the one that was gung-ho, going to save the matrix, going to pull all its cells out and all that. But it had enough of the influence of its fallen ones, that were 89% of its consciousness at this point, saying, it's somebody else's fault. It's your fault, so we're going to pay. That collective made a decision that it would use its knowledge of primal creation physics, and that it would take over the matrix, this matrix. That was originally what its fallen parts had wanted, and what it had tried to stop its fallen parts from doing. And there was a little problem when this decision was made, because there was the Eye of Yahweh, the Metatron Eye, that was completely under the governance of the Metatronic entity of Giovanni. The Giovanni entity, through the collective of Metatron, turned control of that polarization refraction lens over to the Wysadek collectives. And they were able to use that to display it. It was already tapped into the phantom matrix on this time matrix. They were able to create, by feeding energy off this time matrix and off phantom, they would pull energy from our time matrix, from the phantom matrix. They would use phantom matrix to pull it from here into their matrix. As long as they were able to feed off something else that had its life force connection to source, they wouldn't go into implosion. If the matrices were severed, they would go into implosion eventually. They'd get a few billion years of evolution out of it. But eventually they would be a deteriorating system. They would become extinct in terms of the race identity that they held. They would go back to source as units of consciousness. And that was unacceptable to them. Now, when the Metatron Collective made the decision to turn the Eye of Yahweh over to the Wysadek matrix, it had to be reprogrammed. The original program, mathematical scalar program of the Eye of Metatron, was compatible with this time matrix and with the phantom matrix and with source. It had the potentiality of regenerating into Christos. In order to do what they did by allowing the eye, creating the Eye of Metatron in a way, putting a program in that would allow it to actually reverse certain things so it could feed instead of just being a conduit that could take some energy, which was supposed to be the collectives getting hosted over, it would be able to open it both ways, send energy in and pull energy out. In other words, send energy in as a carrier wave to drag more energy out than it was supposed to. In order to do this, the programming on the Eye of Metatron had to be changed. It had to be changed from its original base 12, base 15 compatible, and I mean base 12, base 15, the D12 Christos pattern, but built on those 15 spheres that we talked about yesterday in the basic structure, where you have a set of 7, and then another set of 7, and then that takes place within one. All right, so you have 15 spheres. The mathematics were altered in the Eye of Metatron lens to a base 7, where it was like taking the yolk out of an egg. So they would build their system, they would restructure their black hole system on the 7 pattern, which was literally cutting it off from the primal light and sound fields, but allowing it to plug into other systems on their lower heavens level that were built on the 7, because you have the 7 higher and lower heavens. So they took the lower heavens pattern, used it to reprogram and organize their black hole, and that allowed them to be able to tap into other lower heaven systems, other Vecca systems. This created a distortion in the consciousness that was part of the Wysadek matrix. The Wysadek matrix people were doing bad enough as it was before they had Metatron get involved. They had certain successes as far as Aramatsus was concerned. Aramatsus was a planet that was, or a planetary system that was evolving close to where it could be brought back to its Christos imprint. But once the Eye of Metatron was used and run through the Aramatsus stargates, it completely changed that. It completely redid the mathematical structure of their stargates so they couldn't plug in to a system, to a Christos system. So it not only posed a threat to our time matrix, but it totally, all the progress that had been made in healing the Wysadek system had been totally unplugged and undone. And the thing with the Metatronic system is it's permanent. Some things in physics can be undone. Some things reach critical mass, and if they reach a critical mass of distortion where there's less than 30% of their natural Christos template left, they become something else, and they're no longer compatible with their own template. That's what happened with the Wysadek matrix. The consciousness that was residing in that matrix and the planetary systems and the stargates in that matrix can't be plugged in again because of the choices that were made. And the main choice was made by the Metatron Giovanni entity, but it was made on behalf of many other collectives of the fallen ones that had petitioned to do, petitioned for them to do this. Please, you have control of the lens. Give us life, give us eternal life. You know that we'll implode. All they had to do was agree to bioregenesis and agree to play fair. If they had entered the Emerald Covenant, they would have been able to evolve out. But it was known, and their scientists, their high-mind scientists knew that if they created this artificial mathematical structure, there was a way of bending light and sound that was based on the Vesica Pisces, 2 interwoven spheres. Now, the natural time matrix is based on a trivecca, not a bivecca. First there's a trivecca, and the bivecca is part of that. You would go single, bivecca, trivecca. That's a natural structure. What they did was simply use the Eye of Metatron as their 0 point or their 1 point and build a double from there, a bivecca from there. They created artificial light through this particular synthesis of mathematics. They created totally polarized light through this process, because at least with the trivecca you have the 2 polarized points that are unified through the third. In their universe, everything is bipolar. It's like having a real bad chemical day, bipolar disorder. It's a whole universal system that's structured on bipolar disorder, which implies they have extremes of dramas. They have extreme highs and extreme lows, and they're constantly in that cycle. Now, the races that were in the Wysadek matrix at that time, they chose this. They wanted this, most of them, at least the creator gods, what they call themselves creator gods in that matrix, wanted it, because it would promise them one thing. As long as that Eye of Metatron was their vampire energy-sucking device, they would have eternal life. They would be immortal. They would have the closest thing they could get to ascension without having to cooperate. They could have got regular ascension if they just, decided to be nice and didn't want to play Masters of the Universe. The Metatronic bodies that were created through the programming are very interesting structures. They take part of what would be a normal living biological structure, and they take out certain parts, the mathematics that are missing, or pieces of the template that are missing, and they plug in certain parts of the template together that weren't originally meant to be plugged in together. Completely destroys the entire template when it's fully done. There's not 30% left where you can do bioregenesis to plug it back into its natural divine blueprint. It creates an atrocity. It creates something other than what was originally created in the Christos vein, and it creates something that is not compatible with the mathematics or the scalar frequencies of the Christos divine blueprint for this matrix or any other one. So in making a choice to be immortal, they made a choice to be finite, because their immortality is dependent on sucking energy from living things, living matrices. That's why they will go out of their way, and that's why at this point, we'll get into the drama more tomorrow, because I want to get into the history. So I want, by tomorrow, when we start to talk about what this means to us and why we need to know it today, I want you to understand, the history of where this comes from. But there were races of consciousness created, both of draconian, because some of the draconian races that were in Phantom decided they wanted to play. That sounds good. Yeah, we can be immortal. Yeah, we can be immortal without having to cooperate with them. Yeah, then we can fight with you. Right? There were a whole bunch of hybrid races created from the races of the fallen matrix. These began about 150 billion years ago. They started this connection with the Wisadek matrix. By 570 million years ago, it had become an absolute outrage. Because 570 million years ago, the races and collectives that had agreed to go into the Metatronic pattern, and Metatron wasn't being prejudiced at that point, the more we can get the better, so they would let any of them, if the Odedicron wanted to come out of Phantom, they'd take them over there. If the Omicron wanted, they'd take them over there. What they didn't tell them is when they got on the other side, they'd become assimilated, which means their consciousness would be repatterned. They call it dot adjusting. There are some programs out there right now that teach you how to meet your thought adjuster. We'll talk about those tomorrow. But they would literally assimilate the consciousness of the being that came over into the electrostatic bodies that they had created themselves through the Metatronic imprint. They ate them, energetically speaking. It wasn't eating with big teeth and ripping flesh. It was transmuting the flesh through a certain type of Merkaba. And once the consciousness was in Merkaba, bringing it over and assimilating it through the reverse Merkaba fields that they had created through the Metatronic reversals. The Metatronic program that allowed for this artificially sustained dead living system were reversals of portions, where you took portions of the natural divine blueprint and pulled pieces out, pulled frequencies out. What was a base 12 was reduced to a base 8, which meant there are 8 sub-frequency bands in every dimension instead of 12, and there were only 11 dimensions instead of 12. This structure, through this structure, this program, and then they take that structure and then they reverse the mathematical programming on it. That was the last step I wanted to explain there. So they take pieces out, make it a base 8, and reverse it. And then it would repel itself from the natural matrices. But it had the Metatronic eye, where it could siphon energy off other systems. The body forms created through this structure are pretty awesome. They're like astral bodies, like what we might consider our astral body or our ghost body. They would have the image of the being that originally went into the Wisadek matrix and adopted the Metatronic program. So let's say if you decided you wanted to go, you would be able to maintain yourself, but you'd be kind of like ghost-like. It would be an electrostatic body, a body that didn't evolve or grow or change. It always stayed that way, as long as you fed it. And what you would feed it by would be the frequencies of other living things. Now, 570 million years ago, after many races were created within the Wisdom matrix on the Metatronic program, they decided it was time to come and get what they wanted, which was the rest of us, which was the Phantom Matrix first. Because there was an interesting thing. The Phantom Matrix axis, if you look at our universal stargates as one Cathara grid, the Phantom Matrix axis came in at a 22.5 degree angle. It was running reverse, but it was a 22.5 degree shift from our vertical axis. The Wisdom matrix was on the other side, 22.5 degree shift. We were right in the middle. So they found a way to barrel through, to use wormhole technology, which is poking holes in the natural template to connect things that aren't supposed to be connected. That's like connecting the artery that runs through your neck to the one that runs through your heart to create a bypass that doesn't belong there. And eventually it collapses because it doesn't work really well, because it's not natural. They created something called the Arimathea wormhole. They used Arimathzus, which was their D11.5 star system planet that had almost made it into, return to Christic template, but fell. They created a wormhole between that through the moon of our, not our moon, but the moon of our D11 gate. Now our D11 gate was Avion. Its moon was called Avalon. They created the wormhole through Avalon and into Phantom, so it made an arc of open frequency. That began the building of something called the cube matrix. The cube matrix is the wonderful creation, the quite brilliant creation of divine science used with an anti-Christos intention. It is a, let's say, created life field. You could compare it to artificial intelligence, really. It's created without a soul because it's disconnected from what you would consider soul. It's disconnected from its connection to source, but it is able to sustain by science. The Metatronic lens is science. This is high science used for perversion. It wasn't originally. Metatron originally was a good guy. But that changed, and when that changed, a whole new type of creation was brought into being that was never seen. It was literally a beginning point, which is hard to do when time is simultaneous. Wait a minute, what begins first? So obviously somewhere, the potentiality for it existed all along in the creations that Source created when it created the matrix itself. But I think, this is my speculation, maybe when we get all up there and we have the whole thing back, and we may feel differently, I think even Source was a bit surprised at how well that it actually was possible that this could take place. That also implies that if Source knew that that potentiality existed and would therefore probably be explored, it also knew there must be ultimately a healing. And Source did know there would be a healing, because a worst case scenario, even if everything imploded, it was still within itself, within Source. So Source itself was willing to gamble just to see what to experience, what it could create. Source learns. It's not a static field. From every experience it creates for itself, it learns something new. Except it's already something it already knew. It's very hard to describe direct cognition of simultaneous time and simultaneous space. It's hard to... Might suck some things in until it hits a certain critical mass. But at some point, the mechanics that were set in motion with the original creation will come in and reset the balance, where the fields begin to separate. The living field it's feeding off of will begin to pull away. The divine blueprint there will reset itself. And these are very long cosmic cycles when this resetting occurs. But there will always be a cosmic cycle of resetting of the divine blueprint. And that ensures that anything that became disharmonic, any black hole systems that were made, will be severed from the original matrix. That gets healed, and the other one has X amount of energy left, however much it managed to siphon, and it will have evolution until it expends its energy. And then it will implode upon itself, and it will become part of the particles, the particae, particae, and particum, that make up the dimensional fields. And what will happen then, once it's purged, is like a purification where it clears its own distortions by blowing itself apart. Those units of consciousness return to innocence, will then reassimilate into the original matrix from which they fell. But there will be no memory of the fall or of what they were. We're at a position right now where a cosmic cycle is coming to ending and a beginning. The Metatronic bodies are frightening things in a way, because the races that agreed to participate in order to have short-term immortality in exchange for eternal life, they sentenced themselves to that destiny, the path of Arimathea that was originally intended as a path of evolution, a faster path of evolution back into Christendom, became the path of de-evolution. It became the path of the Metatronic imprint, which has no alternative but to return to source through implosion. Now, there are vast races there at this point, because the evolution has gone for so long. There are many, many races that originally started out as a handful of races of Draconian, Weesadek. Now, Weesadeks were the ones who originally weren't even part of this matrix. They had fallen from another collective and created that black hole system, that ours got hooked into. And the Anu Elohim. All of these races, there was just a small amount of them from the higher density fields, the higher dimensional fields, like D11, D10. Once they had made the Metatronic promise, and they had allowed their templates to be recoded, they created spawn. They created more of themselves. They, just like the creator gods, just like Source, created the Ascended Masters, and the Ascended Masters created the Rishi, and the Rishi created the Avatars and the Christos Founders races, and they created us down here. They decided, well, now we've got our own universe. We're masters of the universe now. Now we're God over here. And they began to create and populate their matrix with more and more races that had to feed off other living races in order to sustain their matrix. So at this point, there are many, many races there. And there's a reason in here why there's a lot of people that you can look at things that are Christic and anti-Christic, and you can understand them as part of a larger understanding that Source has, or you can go into blame, and you can call one bad, evil, and it should be destroyed. Or you can understand what it's about and where it fits, and you can perhaps feel for the destiny it chose for itself. So even though you can't allow it to harm you, you can still find love, no matter how horrific the things are that it might have done. The races of Phantom Matrix, once they became combined with the Weesadek Matrix, became a force of what, on this planet and many others, is known as the Antichrist. It is a collective, it's not just a singular. But imagine if you were a being. Now, imagine if you were a being that you didn't have a lot of memory of where you came from, because they don't give their own memory of where they came from. You were living in planetary systems. What if you found out that your only destiny was implosion, unless you tapped into other systems? What if you knew that ascension was no longer even a possibility for you? That the only way you could go home and be healed to go back to where you came from was to do it in total innocence, like a child, with no knowing whatsoever, because you'd go back in pieces. There's a terror in that feeling, the terror of annihilation. That great, my parts might go back, but I'm not going to know it. There's a feeling of being finite. And if you look around at the world we're in today, you can see the huge effect that these races have had once they begin to blend with the races here. Because most of our dogmas that we talked about earlier, the religious dogmas, even the science dogmas, are all coming from that place. They're all coming from a place where ascension really isn't an option. Survival of the fittest is one of the things that happens when a race realizes it's finite. And the only way it can sustain and not implode and not be blown back to space dust is to take energy from something else. It will. Unless it has enough D12, which it wouldn't be in that predicament if it did. If it had D12, it would realize, get it over with. Let me go back to space dust, because then I can get out of here. Then I can get free again. They can be free. It will be a long evolution for them, but they would go back into as the basic consciousness that forms the matrix they originally fell out of. And they would eventually be able to be renewed through new forms that would be created in that matrix. But they are living a reality where they're creator gods, and they have gods. There's a couple popular ones. One is called Jehovah. Another one is called Ahala. Gives you an idea of some of the gods here. There's another one called Brahma. There's several. And these are like D11. They call them D11 dark avatars. They're avatar collectives. D11, 11.5 at the highest level of them. That 0.5 they get from plugging into the Metatronic eye. Now, the lens of the eye of Metatron was only the beginning of what became a nightmare. It's a nightmare we've all been living. And sometimes there is a temporary reprieve in the reality of ignorance is bliss. We've been living that little space since 9558 BC. Kind of like let's take a breather and pretend we don't know anything. Since the 570 million years ago, since the Arimathea wormhole was created, a whole series of them were created to link through our gates into Phantom, to link the three together. There are also massive galactic wars, intergalactic wars, that were fought over this. There was a group of the original fallen ones in the Phantom Matrix that didn't want to go into the Weesadite Matrix. They didn't want to go into the Emerald Covenant either. So they were going to fight the Weesadeks. And they had members of their own that joined the Weesadeks. So it was splitting up of the races. There was a period of time called the Gaian-Orion Wars. And they took place 570 million years ago, right after the Arimathea wormhole was created, when there were massive wars fought in the Gaia system, which from here is Polaris, which is Earth's density 3 counterpart, and in the Orion system, where we have Stargate 8 in Mintaka Orion. There's also something called Alnitak and Alnilam Orion, and all of those systems with their various inhabited races in Phantom Matrix and in here and in Weesadek began to fight. The guys here didn't fight. They were trying to defend, because what was happening were the Weesadeks were coming through and they were seizing control of various of the Stargates in Phantom. They attached Metatronic lenses to Stargate 8 in Phantom Matrix, and that was Alnitak. They attached it to Stargate 10 in Vega. They connected one of their planets to the part of Vega that had entered Phantom Matrix. They worked themselves down from 11. They had at 11.5. They had their Aramat planet. They connected that to the moon in D11, the Avalon moon in Phantom. They connected next, that was D11, 11.5. And they connected the 10 systems. And they put a Metatronic, they called them seed atoms. They put Metatronic seed atoms, which were a series of lenses, into D10 Phantom Vega. Now the Phantom templates were created, a lot of them during the original fall, when Stargate 12 had been imploded through blocking Stargate 11. It had sent a portion into the Phantom imprint, which means reversal. It went into a reversed mathematical pattern, and they were all sustained by the Eye of Brahman that was put in. So, planetary system, dimensional system by dimensional system, the Weesadeks managed to create wormhole links through using this particular mathematics and crystal technology that were referred to as the Metatronic seed atoms, putting them in the stargates between Phantom and here. They linked through the halls of Amenti before the halls of Amenti were there. In fact, the halls of Amenti were created later because of this. They were the natural stargates in our system. They began to seed them with the Metatronic atoms, which meant there is a bridge, that ark. They have their own Ark of the Covenant, and it's not a holy covenant either. They created arcs of frequency that would run from Wysadek matrix through our stargates into Phantom. And eventually, what their ultimate goal was to do it all the way down from D11 all the way down to D1, link all the systems together, and then use the power to pull both of them into their matrix. So you could pull this time matrix down, literally break it off from its D12 connection at 11.5 at the Metatronic eye, and reverse its whole mathematical coding, and reverse Phantom, and pull everything in them into the Metatronic imprint. That would be permanent if that were to happen. So of course the founders knew from the beginning that that was not going to be allowed to happen. There would be the sweep of the great cosmic cycle that would come through and open all of the highest gates and reset the D12 divine blueprint. What that would do would create a polarization wave that would separate anything that didn't belong in this divine blueprint originally and didn't have 30% of its original divine blueprint left because it had the Metatronic override, would be taken in to the Metatronic system. It wasn't a choice the founders made to cause harm to the ones in the Metatronic system. The Metatronic races blame the founders for this. They take no responsibility for the fact that they're the ones that created this darn blasphemy of science themselves. They sealed their own destiny when they created the Metatronic distortion. And at this point, they are simply trying to feed on whatever's available. They've done an amazing thing. When I show you this one graph, it'll give you an idea of just the brilliance, the intelligence level. You can be really intelligent and really stupid at the same time. But the sophistication of intelligence or intellect that these beings have to be able to take science. They're not just moving bodies around, they're moving galaxies around. They're moving suns. They're connecting suns to suns to suns through stargates. When you think about the level of intelligence that it takes to do that, and the level of knowledge it takes to do that, and then you think about us here, right now, it's almost laughable on the cosmic game. But there's an innocence about us, our race. That's what's going to get us through. But this is where it can almost get scary if we didn't know better. Now, if we know our direct connection, we know we have our D12 frequency available now, and if we amplify that in our fields, we get those Merkabahs built, we're going to be okay. We don't have to be afraid. But boy, is this one of those underdog games. You see those dramas with the underdog, the little guy, the David and Goliath. Well, right now, we're dealing with self-appointed creator gods from a fallen matrix that have painstakingly, over a very long period of the illusion of linear time, created a technology. We'll get more fully into the technology tomorrow. It's known as the beast. And in the Bible, it's referred to as the beast, with 7 heads and 10 horns, etc., etc. I'll show you something. This is what has been built in stages. Do we have this one yet?
No.
We don't have this one yet. They can't get it?
No.
There's no way this will shine through paper, is there? No. Shoot. Wait a minute. Actually, this is the... Do we have this one? Mm-hmm. Okay, that one's the one I need.
What?
This is the one I need up on here. Do we have that one?
Not on film,
Oh, we don't have any of them on film? They can't get either of them on film. Bummer. Okay. Well, there's enough... All right, we can pass those out. How come they can't get either of them on film?
What's... The one that will process film doesn't have a cartridge, and I can't find another one.
Oh. I need one too. Oh, okay, I got the master. Now, this is not a finished graph, but this is enough for tonight's discussion. In the little blank spot down on the left, there's going to be more stuff for tomorrow. We would have been another hour. So I figured this is enough for tonight. Okay. Now, as it needs deciphering, what we have, straight lines going across, okay? The horizontals, they're the dimensional scale, okay? 0 all the way up through 11.5, you can see. D12 is up there, where you see the little thing that has eyelashes. And the 12. Yeah, this will be fine-tuned, but I didn't have a lot of time to play with it. It's a lot better than the first copy, though. That got passed around at I had it for the last workshop, but in like really bad rough form. So this is a little clearer. This is evolving. What this is showing us is, first of all, on the left, is our natural Cathara grid of our first 12 dimensions, our universal stargates 1 through 12. Now, they would be the larger circles. All right, you have, like at the bottom where the 0 point is, you have that little diamond-shaped thing that says LZ, which is lock 0 point. Okay, if we remember from the maps from last night. Here we do. Some of us. All right. And then, like right up above that, you have a little circle with a number 1, and then straight up from that, you have a circle with a number 2. They're our Cathara grid, okay? They would be the gates of our Cathara grid. The little diamond-shaped things are the locks, the density locks, the main locks, not the little dimensional ones. Now, our axis, the axis of which our universal stargates are running on, would be that vertical one, that straight vertical one running from 12 all the way down to 1. Bless you. Now, on this diagram, you'll also notice, over to the side on each of them, there's another axis coming through. The one that's on the left at top of the diagram, that is the phantom matrix axis. It's actually about a 22.5 degree shift from our axis. And that's the dotted line that runs down. Now, over on the other side, on the right side of our axis, you have the Wysadek Cathara grid axis. Now, these would each have their own Cathara grids running, right? They would have their own gate system, except they wouldn't have 12 gates. They only have 11. Now, in this diagram, right under our gate 12 and above our gate 11, there's a circle with a little square in it. That's Metatron's Eye of Yahweh. It's through there that the link begins. All right. Over on the right side, the first circle on the Wysadek matrix would be Arimathus and the Arimathea wormhole. If you go across to the left side at 11.5, this is where you would have Avion and Avalon. Avion is our gate 11, but then in Phantom you have their moon, which is Avalon. So it's through this link at 11.5 that the linking began. This linking began the creation of something called the cube matrix. The cube matrix is the diagram, the middle diagram that's on the right of the one we were just talking about. If you put a hand over the right side, if you see the little hearts in the middle, right? If you hide half of that, the right side, like if you hold it up and hide this side, put your hand over this side. It's hard to hold it up. You'll notice that it's a full Cathara grid, an 11 Cathara grid. And if you do the same and look at the other side, it's another 11 Cathara grid. This is the two of them plugged together. All right? The two that are plugged together are the phantom matrix and the Wysadek matrix. And they're plugged through this middle axis, which is us. This is what they're trying to complete. It's not finished yet. Down here, in the lower frequencies on our scale, there's the final heart. If you look at it again over on the right side, well, when you're looking at it, it's on the left side. This one over here. I get dyslexic doing this sometimes. And you go to the number 2. there's a little heart right below that. It's actually at 1.75 dimensional frequencies. That one is not active yet. That is the one they are trying to activate now. This one's called, it's the fourth black heart of Metatron. If you notice, there are 4 of these little hearts. Now what the hearts do, each lobe of the heart, or each side of the heart, takes one of the axes. If you notice how these axis lines come through and they cross over at the 6 gates, like right by our 6 gate. These hearts take the 2 and make it as if they're one. They take the frequencies that are running through the central vertical current of the Cathara grid of phantom that had come through this side of the heart, and then the ones running through Wisadek come through this side of the heart. What they've done, using this heart and eye technology, is they've taken D6 frequency from phantom, and they've forcefully and artificially, using the Vesica Pisces mathematics through the Metatronic eye, combined it with D7 frequency from the Wisadek matrix. Now, both the D6 frequency from phantom and D7 from Wisadek are both reverse matrix frequency, meaning their mathematical pattern that creates the scalar waves for those frequencies is reversed compared to the natural matrix and the natural divine blueprint for any of the matrices. They've created an artificial D13 reverse current. D13 is the primal blue light field that D12 connects into. What they are trying to do is create their own divine blueprint and a reverse matrix. It would have the power progressively to overpower the divine blueprint of this matrix and others if they're successful in creating it. The sophistication of this setup, I mean, it's very hard to even draw it in simple terms because you have, talk about sacred geometries and unsacred geometries. You have what's called, this is the Metatron's cube matrix, and anyone that studied any Metatronics, they tend to get into Metatron's cube and the, let's say, seed of life and flower of life and all of those kind of things. They should put one word before life there, artificial. Because those programs, those Metatronic science programs, are the programs of the cube matrix. They're the programs of the reverse Metatronic eye. They're the programs that have created an electrostatic universe of immortal life field, but not eternal life field. Immortals that need to feed on living matrices. In other words, vampires. This is where our vampire legends came from. This is where the concept of vampires come from. Now, they're not bloodsuckers in the traditional sense that have big long teeth and they pop up. Well, some of them are actually, but most of them aren't. That, pop over and grab you by the neck and suck your blood out and boom, you're a vampire. It's energy vampiring. And without it, they die. They implode. Now, what's been done here, it's amazing, really. I mean, I just look at the creation, I think, you at least got to give them credit for being smart. I mean, well, no, kind of stupid, but intelligent, I think. Difference between smart and intelligent. They're brilliant to have figured out how to do this. I have a hard enough time just translating it off the plates on what is it they did? What does this mean to us? Oh, gosh. They've managed to tap into the templates, the scalar wave templates, of all of the systems that go with our primary stargates in this matrix. The final one they're trying to activate is connected to Earth and to a star, we call it a star, called Epsilon in the Eridanus constellation. And that will open their final connection to one they already have, an eye they already have active, that's in Trapezium Orion, which is an Orion's sword, I believe. No, it's not here. Is it here, somebody? So, anyway, this diagram will further evolve, but for now it's enough to show you where the hearts are. And if you want to know where they're located in terms of... Now, I've had time to do the galactic hearts. It'll take more time to figure out exactly where the universal hearts are located. I mean, these are actual coordinates in outer space up there. All right? These are crystal lens systems that have been placed in the cores of planets. So they're actually real. It's like the mess we have in the grids here that we've talked about before, like the microchips that form the APIN and LPIN systems. Well, these are large versions of that. Now, the reason we weren't given this information before is because the guardian races and the founders were very much hoping it wouldn't be necessary at this time. We had enough to deal with of getting us through a stellar activation cycle with the other problems with phantom matrix that there were. The Wysideks weren't intending to do their thing until 2011. Their thing has to do with the technology that we'll talk about tomorrow that's called the turnstile matrices. The turnstile matrices ultimately have the purpose of creating the shift. It's not just a pole shift of our planet that's intended. It's a pole shift of 11 dimensions of our time matrix that will allow phantom to be pulled in through us and all of us pulled into Wysidek. That's not going to happen because the cosmic cycle is coming to an end and a new beginning. The divine blueprint is going to anchor here, and anything that has 30% of its original divine blueprint has the ability to be at least hosted out where it doesn't go into Wysidek or full Metatronic programming. Right now we're living on a planet that at various stages has been progressively plugged into the Metatronic program. We're on about 2/3 Metatronic program right now. That means 2/3 of our grids are running on reverse Merkaba. 2/3 of our grids are running the Metatronic mathematics. That means 2/3 of our bodies are running the reverse as well. That means we have a Metatronic virus, all of us, every life form on this planet. But we still have, at least some of us that started out with a Christos divine blueprint, have the ability to clear a lot of that. We'll talk about some very particulars that are happening in our time frame now, that we'll talk about them tomorrow when we get into the beast and how this thing works and what it means in terms of our DNA and what it means for the fact that they've activated it now instead of waiting till 2011. That gives us less time to accomplish certain things, both personally and collectively. But it doesn't mean it's time to get scared. Fear is the worst thing we can choose. We need to recognize it's a choice. There's a victory that's happening in the fact that the final conflict drama is coming now. That victory has to do with, finally, both sides will be honored. For ages and ages, the Wysideks and the fallen ones who joined them wanted their own universe. They wanted their own place where they could be creators of the universe, they could be the gods, they could be the masters of the universe, everybody had to listen to them. And ever since this whole drama began, the guardian races and the Christos founders races were like a thorn in their side. We prevented them, technically speaking, in our desire to heal them. We prevented them from having the expression of their free will because we didn't want to see them destroy themselves. At this point, now we've suffered a lot for that choice because progressively more and more races have adopted the Metatronic virus, either willingly or unwillingly, which is what happened here. The races here didn't agree to this. Only a small handful of them did. And that happened back in Atlantis. They were the Leviathan hybrid races that were under the jurisdiction of Thoth and Enoch. Thoth originally was part of the Emerald Covenant, and so was Enoch. They were entrusted with a biogenesis experiment here that would help some of their fallen ones in Phantom Matrix to get out, because the Phantom Matrix ones could still be evolved. They didn't have the Metatronic distortions. They had enough of their own reversals, but they didn't have the severing of the pattern and fusing of the pattern in an unnatural way. It's like taking, if you have 12 subfrequency bands in every dimension, okay, say every DNA strand has 12 subfrequency bands in it. They not only knocked out, say, 9 through 12, but they knock out a part of 1, a part of 2, a part of 3, and then they connect the parts that were still active and fuse them together in an unnatural bond that can't be undone once it's done. So the races, for this planet, as recently as Atlantis had the ability to still bioregenesis out. Thoth made a choice. That was a very, very bad choice. Thoth was an Anunnaki who almost fully got back his Christos pattern. He made it to 11.5. And then he made a choice to join with the Weesadex, to lead his people into the Weesadex. And there was a small collective of Thothian high priests that knew. And the rest of the middle and low priests, the Templar Melchizedeks, weren't told what they were getting initiated into. They begin the fire sword initiations. The fire sword initiations, the flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael, which is a Nephilim collective of the Weesadex. It was a type of initiation where you'd go into a temple and you would say, yes, I give permission to have this immortal frequency run through me, without knowing what you were getting yourself into. And you'd get zapped. You'd get zapped with frequency that would be able to overpower your not quite, the Leviathan races weren't activated to 12th strand yet. They were just getting their 5th strand imprint when this mess began. And it took their 5th strand and it recoded it to the Metatronic pattern. And they would get juiced on that. You could get some real frequency flowing through you on that. But it was frequency that progressively took away the ability to ever regenerate the Christos pattern. Frequency that started a race line. It started the Leviathan race line in full as a master's invader race that was intended, and they were told to go forth and multiply. They were sent in to intermingle with our root races and our cloister races whenever possible, to send the Metatronic DNA distortion in to all of the race lines. So by the time the stellar activation cycle of this period came, everyone would have critical mass of Metatronic distortion. So we would help the planet to pull itself in to reversal, because so many of us were spinning unreversed Merkaba on the Metatronic pattern. Thoth went over in 22,326 BC. They wanted to finish it off then, but they weren't able to do it then because the founders' races blocked the stargates from activating any further. So they couldn't run Archangel Michael's flaming blue sword down through this. Because what this flaming blue sword is, it's that D7 plus D6 artificial D13 current that runs down the center pillar. It runs down our gate line. And it crosses over at the 6 points. Now, there's another diagram. We have those run off too, Lou? There's another diagram. This one's going to be hard to read because I didn't have time to white out a bunch of stuff we don't need. This was made from the one you've seen in the Dance For program that you're probably still trying to figure out what that means. You should be able to basically, if I point to things, you should be able to understand this. It would have been easier if we could have had, transparencies on this, but I'll just use this for now to show where the flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael comes through. Okay, when you get these, this is the top. All right, there are 3 points. There are 3 axes that are running here with Cathara grids. One, let me get my fingers on them and hopefully I can hold it up with just the 3 like that. 1, 2, 3. It's bending on me. Wait a minute. Let me find them again. There. There are 3 Cathara grids running, basically, where my 3 fingers are in the front there. One, I'm trying to, yeah, that would help, thank you. One is running down this way. Yeah, okay. One is coming from here. See where it says the Weesadex axis? That one's running down this way. This one's the Phantom axis. This one's running down this way. And this is our natural axis. I'll explain it if people over there can't see? Is there anybody, did somebody say they couldn't see? Okay. So these are basically the three axes. When we have the other diagram, when you see this one over here on the other diagram, that shows our main axis and then the two little axes coming in over there. There. You know, there's ours, there's the phantom, and there's the Wysadek. Now, they link through the 6 gates. This is the 666. Phantom Gate 6, our Gate 6, and Wysadek Gate 6. That is the crossbar, or the cross, of the flaming blue cross of Archangel Michael. That's where the frequency fully comes through and is able to go on the vertical and run from their matrices completely down ours, braiding this one and this one together through ours, and then pulling the whole thing over into that axis. It literally, through the hearts that were shown on this diagram, those hearts are like braiding machines. They're crystalline technologies that take 2 sets of frequencies and braid them together. And when the final heart starts beating, when that one is activated, the one down here at D1.5, that one will set in motion the braiding. Now, what we're facing in our contemporary times is the activation of the things called the turnstiles on the planetary level and on the galactic level that set in motion the coming of Archangel Michael's flaming blue sword. The trickery that's being done right now to people is one of the things that makes me, I still can get angry. I can understand their desperation. I can understand even how you can get so lost that you can actually blame someone else for your hologram, even though it's your own darn fault. But there's a trickery being done right now through several very, very popular New Age movements. They're taking people into initiations. Heck, Archangel Michael even has all sorts of centers set up. There's one in Sedona, Arizona that has this wonderful chamber to sit in so you can get zapped with the divine frequencies. They're doing the fire sword initiations again. What this does is activate in the human body the 2/3, part of which 1/3 is now dormant, like it's not turned on yet, but it's ready to go, of the Metatronic programming. It's the activation of the Metatronic programming. Once that programming starts to run through the body, our Metatronic shadow begins to take over the body. The Metatronic shadow is conveniently fused to a consciousness collective in the Wysadek matrix. We've got baggage. We have a shadow that was our own consciousness that was taken and put into reversal, that's been hanging out in our field. This is where we get the polarity within ourselves. One says yes, the other says no. One says I want to eat, the other says no, I don't. The one says I'm going to be good, the other says no, I'm going to be bad. You know? Our duality, our chemical duality. Especially it's seen in exaggerated form with bipolar disorders, chemical bipolar disorders that people are suffering from. These are created because of the Metatronic programming that's partially imbued into our DNA templates and imbued into our Merkaba fields. Now we can override this until we have less than 30% of our templates left. The fire sword initiations that are being done right now among certain collectives, and it's not just the ones that use the name Archangel Michael. There's a lot of cover names, any of them that use Metatronic science or Yahweh or any of those type of words. Any of them. They very often use the name Melchizedek, but they don't use the name Cloister. They will, though. Just wait. Yeah, be prepared. There's going to be an Azurite Templar style, Templar Melchizedek style. They'll have no choice because we're exposing them to the point where they have to look like they're one of us in order to get anybody. You know, I mean, it's not yet. There's a lot of people who very much hate the messenger here. And you know, that's too bad. They can make that choice if they want to. We have no need. The founders have no need. Source has no need to recruit anybody. But we made a promise a long time ago that regardless of how bad it got here, we would bring the truth back. And if nobody wanted to hear it, that was okay. They don't have to, because we respect the free will of all of the beings on this planet and every other one. But the Wysideks and the ones who got involved with them, and many of the ones from the Phantom Matrix, don't respect free will at all. They're into dominion. They'll use trickery or outright aggression, whatever's necessary. Trickery is easier. It's easier to get somebody to go along with you than to force them to. If things were allowed to continue without a voice, a still small voice, with much less people than the other real popular movements that are on the circuit, you know, the international circuit really, but especially in the States. It would have been a breaking of our promise if we didn't come to at least set this information. It's like, okay, well, you guys can like follow that, but here's this, take it or leave it. The free will is being honored, even if they hate us for it. And because of that, it's worth it. That's why we come and speak about it. I have nothing against the people, neither do the founders, that are into Archangel Michael, that are into Enoch, that are into the Bible, that are into this, that, and the other thing. Because at this point, all of the dogmas have been positioned since Atlantis to serve one of two agendas, neither of them the Christos agenda. There are two things happening, and there's a final conflict battle brewing. And it's not between the founders' races or the guardians' races. It's between the races of Phantom Matrix, who do not want to be assimilated, and the races of the Wysidek Matrix, the Metatronic Matrix, who want to assimilate them and us. Right now, there's a battle being staged. It was a battle that was really scripted out in Atlantis. We were kind of considered, the guardian races were kind of considered like they'd be hopeless by then. We wouldn't be able to do anything, so they didn't even really worry about us. We've caused them a bit of concern ever since we got the D12 anchored here, because now they're not going to be able to just do a smooth sweep through and take the whole matrix down. But there is a battle brewing, and we're beginning to see it. When we were given the information for Voyagers Volume 2, Second Edition, some things were explained to us about the contemporary drama, about the 9/11 event, September 11th event, how that was a trigger event that was meant to set in motion a certain number of other actions to follow that all are supposed to culminate into a fulfillment of a script that was made in Atlantis, this script being a World War III drama, through which a certain climate would be created that would be much more open for, let's say, visitors from the skies that came in as angels to tell us we can't destroy each other anymore. There's a presence needed on planet to run the HARP machines in the ways that our governments don't know how to run the HARP machines. We were given the technologies for the HARP machine and a few others like it because they plug in to this. They help download the Metatronic frequencies. We're preparing for a very interesting set of events. There's something that will be released for tomorrow. I don't know it. Az doesn't know it. They didn't give it to us yet. It's on security release. Something has to do with May of 2003. There's a big charge around that time period. That's when certain groups of the ascended masters from the immortal, as opposed to eternal, life matrix from the Wysideks are forecasting the beginning of the fourth battle of Armageddon, 4 out of 7. The fourth being the one that's supposed to begin manifesting on Earth in 3D. We are going to be given information tomorrow, and we'll all get it about the same time. I might get it, as I might have it like half hour before you guys do. I don't know what it is, but I know it's probably pretty intense if they've not even given us a clue. There's some other things they did give us a clue about that we'll talk about tomorrow when we talk about the beast. Now, this is part of the beast. This is what the beast is meant to drag us into and to finalize this creation, this Antichristos cube matrix, the Metatronic cube matrix. The turnstiles we'll talk about tomorrow are a contemporary phenomenon that they're contemporary in the fact that they're activating now. They were put in in the Atlantean period before the last fall, in 22,003, 26 BC, is when the final turnstiles were put in here. So we'll talk about what it means to have the beast coming awake and those kind of things. There's a couple other things in the history, I think, that I want to touch on, so we see where other pieces fit. Okay. Oh yeah, we can name the eyes. We're going to do that. That's always fun. I go back to this sheet. Down on the bottom in little chicken scratch. Yeah. Yeah. Eventually these will be typeset and nicely done, but this is the best I could do, is getting it all together fast enough for tonight. These are the 12 eyes of Metatron. You have, at 11.5 to 11.5, the eye of Arimathzus, which on the galactic level connects to Charon, the moon of Pluto. At D11, you have the eye of Merlin. It connects to D11 Avion through Avalon, Lyra's moon, and through something called Chiron in our galaxy. Chiron and Charon are two different things. They used to be one. There's an interesting thing that happened in several phases. The first, I believe, started right before the electric wars ended the whole thing in 5.5 million years ago. But on the other diagram, you can see the orbits of the planets in our galaxy. Our galactic grid is the one that our galactic Athar runs out here horizontally, and it shows the orbits of each of the planets that we know. It also shows a couple other things. One, that number 5, which is now our asteroid belt, was a planet called Maldak. That was destroyed in Seeding 2. Part of Maldak was used to create something called wormwood, which we'll talk about in a minute. If we look up on our galactic one, the one running horizontal over here, number 11 and number 12. Now, we look at Pluto, which is number 10. We look at that as our 9th planet. Well, if you stick Maldak back in there, that makes Pluto our 10th planet. What was originally our 11th planet was Chiron. Something called Chiron. What was our 12th planet was called Nibiru. For a while anyway. Then came a time when Nibiru became our 11th planet because they did something to Chiron and moved parts of it. And they put Nibiru first into the D11 orbit. So it went from being the 12th planet to being the 11th planet, where Chiron was broken apart into Charon and Chiron that pops in and out from Phantom. Now, Charon is the moon of Pluto, the 10th planet. So that was moved down a bit in orbit. Charon. Chiron pops up sometimes. It cycles through from Phantom into here. And it comes up between Saturn and Uranus, I believe. All right, Saturn and Uranus, yeah. Yeah. That's the other half of what used to be the 11th planet in our system. Now, these things were done progressively in order to create links between gates and between eyes, between here and the Phantom and the Wee Cadet matrix. Tomorrow, I'm going to be up half the night doing this graph. What is interesting is all this stuff, plus the stuff you're going to get tomorrow on a version of this without a lot of this on it, they're all done on one graph originally. Whereas like there was so much information on the graph, you didn't even know where to start looking at it. These manipulations of our galactic structure were done in order to allow, now some of you that have taken the Templar course know about Nibiru and how it was taken out of its orbit at 11, that's after the Chiron thing where it was moved into 11, and was put on an artificial orbit that dips in between here and Phantom. So there will be, tomorrow, you'll see a diagram that shows you how Nibiru, that used to be on our orbital plane down here, now follows this orbital plane of the Phantom matrix, and it cycles this way. And it cycles into our system and then back out of our system into Phantom. So it's only visible part of the time. Now the way that was done was they had to find a body, a planetary body, of near equal mass to Nibiru. And they had to run certain type of electromagnetic frequencies using the Blue Sword connection. Part of it, actually. It didn't start with the Blue Sword connection. That was plugged in later. But there was the planet that had been Maldak, our fifth planet, that had been between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt is now. They blew that apart and took a portion of it and created what's called the Battlestar Nibiru. And they put it in the direct opposite orbit of planet Nibiru in order to create a balanced artificial orbit on the phantom matrix thing. So it can, literally the two of them dip in and out of the system. When one comes in, the other goes out. When one's in phantom, the other comes up here. They come up every 3,657.8 years, I believe. Now, Nibiru is not due in for a while. But Wormwood was intended to come in, but not immediately. We'll talk about the dates tomorrow because I have them on another chart that I'll plug into this. The dates, this wasn't something we were going to have to worry about unless the turnstiles activated, unless this beast was set in motion. Now, we were very successful in the planetary grid work that we've helped the Guardians to do. We managed to disconnect one of the main connections of Wormwood to Earth that was anchored through a place very near Stargate 11. It was anchored to Stonehenge in England. We managed to clear that site, and we've been progressively clearing the programs out of the receiver sites called the Nibiruan Dyadic Crystal Grid Temples, what they're called, the crystal bases. But activation of the beast changes that. It doesn't plug Stonehenge back in. It simply overrides the whole process. And it takes control through Jupiter. It takes control of Wormwood. Now, if this beast hadn't been activated at this time, what would have happened was, because we were successful and the Guardians were successful in breaking the connection between Wormwood and Earth, before Wormwood came up out of Phantom, came up through our gates, it would pop up in the Trapezium Orion system. Before it popped up there, they would have been able to literally blow it into fragments, into asteroids, and it wouldn't have entered our system at all. That was the original plan. We also would have had enough time where the grids here would have raised in frequency enough where they couldn't have activated the turnstiles in 2011 like they originally intended. This is why they activated them on March 23rd of 2002, because they weren't going to have, this was their last chance, the Wisadek's last chance. The turnstiles create a dynamic of frequency on the galactic level and the universal level for 11 dimensions worth that utilize the flaming blue sword of Archangel Michael to run frequencies down through. They come in our system, they come up through the Jupiter gate. There's a plug-in through Jupiter. And they link into where they create a draw, and they will draw Wormwood up, even though we severed the connection, so it shouldn't cycle up this way. It will make it cycle up this way, but it will change its orbit. Before, when Wormwood came through, or Nibiru, whichever happened to be the one that was coming through, it would go past Earth, and it would cause some Earth changes, but not. It didn't create huge pole shift or anything because of the way it was aligned. With the alteration in the path that Wormwood would take, see, they're going to actually, the beast was made in a way to allow in our system Wormwood to be used as almost like a tool that would grab the phantom orbit and take it right into Wisadek and pull us in with it. Instead of coming past the Earth, but not between Earth and the Sun, what the turnstiles do through Jupiter, they're the galactic turnstiles that run through the other stars, they make Wormwood come in on its usual phantom matrix axis, then shift axis to where it kind of ricochets around the Sun and comes between Earth and the Sun. You take a planet that's several times larger than Earth, or a body, and you move it rapidly between Earth and the Sun. You've got cataclysmic changes on your hands. Now, this is why we're on Plan B. This is why we had to get to the point of explaining and exposing the Metatronic deception that's taking place. This does not mean, necessarily, I hope, that we're going to go through massive pole shift. It means that the guardian races have to do something drastic, obviously. Because if it's left alone, there was an interesting book that was put out, interestingly, because it's by the same one that publishes my material, the Guardian books. The publisher that publishes our books also publishes several other people, from different agendas, which is nice, keeps him safe, and, he's just there to let people have a voice. Bless. Explaining how pole shift happens when Nibiru comes through, because Nibiru naturally comes through, according to them. They're not revealing what's happening. They're just trying to say that Nibiru comes through on a regular basis. It always happens this way, la-di-da. But they're very accurate. The book is called Zetatok. It gives you a kind of graphic description of what happens when Nibiru comes through. And they also talk about the ricochet around the sun thing. But they reverse the order. There's two passes. One when it comes in and another when it comes back out. They make it look like the first one is the bad one. It isn't. It's the second one that's the bad one. But it gives us an idea of if it went that bad, of what we've got to do something to make sure it doesn't happen. They talk about firestorms. They talk about, in very eloquent scientific terms, how the crust of the Earth, in a pole shift, slides across, and how certain things stop and other things don't and keep going, and what that might mean to a person, say, in a cave or standing on a mountain. Like, where is the safe spot in this mess? They talk about the rivers turning red, the water's turning red, because of the iron oxide in the tail of the comet Nibiru as it comes past, and how it toxifies a third part of the waters, and things like this. There's some truth in that, but only if we see the probability where the guardians did nothing. I don't know yet. They haven't told me. This is what's on security clearance. What has to be done to stop this? But it has been set in motion. This is where the emerald eyes that we started to talk about come in. The emerald eyes are lenses also that are in the planetary grids and also in the galactic grids and the universal grids. They were placed in proximity to the Metatronic eyes, that if the Metatronic eyes activated and began to transmit the flaming blue sword frequencies, that artificial D13 current, the emerald eyes would break it apart again, back into its natural, and it would create a polarization wave, that whatever had the WISADEC programming would go its way, and whatever had natural, 30% or more would go, the other way, back into potential for divine blueprint realignment. We're in the middle of this now. I don't know what the guardians have to do. They do. They know. And they'll talk to us more about it tomorrow. They'll talk to Az and I about, okay, all right, what's next, guys? But the emerald turnstiles are the beginning of the process of preventing that ricochet around the sun thing of Wormwood. Now, I'm wondering if there's a way that, and I have a feeling, this is just like me feeling it out, thinking, okay, what are they going to do about this? The thing is, the turnstiles and activation of the beast is pulling it up, pulling Wormwood up into our matrix, into the Orion system, which then goes into our gate system much faster than it normally would have. It accelerates the whole process. It pulls it up much faster. They're going to have to do something, and I'm wondering if it has to do with blowing it up like they were intending to beam it with D12 frequency. If they do that, because it's all created on an artificial reversed current, the planetary body, or the large asteroid body of Wormwood would shatter, and it would turn into many little asteroids. If it was going to come in, they had originally said, even on Plan A, if they were not able to catch it before it made the pass in from Phantom into our system, they would fragment it So we might get heavy-duty asteroid showers, but we wouldn't get blasted with a planet twice as big as our own, because the thing is huge. Nibiru was large, and I'm not sure compared to Jupiter how large it was. It was smaller than Jupiter, I believe, but I think it was twice the size of Earth. So that's a big thing coming through. Now, since they're not going to be able to stop it from coming up, and there's something with these turnstiles that if they try to blow it apart now before it comes up, it'll create a chain reaction through all the gates, and it'll start imploding the Stargate system and our galactic stargates. Like all of a sudden, Jupiter might supernova, that kind of thing. And that would totally wipe out progressively, create a chain reaction of wiping out the solar system. So plan A of turning it into asteroids before it comes up into our system or right after isn't an option. They have an option, and they're going to try to explain that to me in a NAS between now and tomorrow, so we'll be able to explain it to you. It's not something that you need to leave here afraid of, but it's important to be aware, because we're starting to see the Earth changes already, and they're going to get more. We were hoping 3 years ago when we began teaching that certain things could be totally avoided. I mean, if the Anunnaki had stayed in the Emerald Covenant and the Pleiadian-Sirian agreements, none of this would be taking place. We would be working on the same side, and they would have turned over the whole Nibiru apparatus to the founders, where it could not be utilized this way. That didn't happen. They broke the Pleiadian-Sirian agreements that were made in 1992, and they joined the United Resistance, United Intruder Resistance, and declared war against the founders, just like they did a couple other times. Last time fully being the Electric Wars of 5.5 million years ago, which ended up in destruction of all of the races on the planet. We're not, to my knowledge, facing massive cataclysm in the next 10-year period. I say to my knowledge because there may be more than I have been told right now. And I may know that by tomorrow. If something bad was going to happen and we were going to get wiped out in May, they'd let us know right now, immediately. And part of the reason why we're doing the advanced, the Dance For programs, instead of taking a year for each level, they're throwing them at us. There's not even time to write the books. If we can get the graphs down and talk about it. Because we need to build the Merkabah. Because if it does get freaky, I mean, we were here and we had an earthquake the other day up in Crete. This is getting pretty good. I mean, the next thing is a tidal wave, I swear, because when we went to Peru, I'm only joking, and the universe knows this. But when we went to Peru, the day before we arrived at Machu Picchu, there was a massive landslide, and a big part of the mountain fell off. And we had to walk around it, because the buses couldn't go anymore. It was literally on the path up to Machu Picchu that the bus takes to go up to the top. It was oh, that's weird. The day before we arrived. Okay. In fact, the day we were supposed to have a private sitting up there in the evening, it was canceled because the stuff had fallen down the day before. It's somebody doesn't want us up there. Well, now we happen to be, in Crete, and just so happened to up there mention the Chi. I feel like this place is going to have an earthquake. Honestly, I was thinking 2002, 2003, maybe 2004. And rumble that night. Oh my God. So these are signs that things are getting a bit active in Mother Earth. Over in Mexico, not Popo, but the other one. Remember the name of it? I forget the name of it.
It's close to Mexico City, isn't it?
Yeah, it's close to Mexico City. Yeah, but it's not Popocatépetl or whatever that I can never pronounce. Well, they're expecting any day now for this thing to blow. All right, they've already evacuated. They're doing news spots of the little guys that live at the bottom that aren't going to leave anyway because they fought for so long to get that land. They're afraid if they leave, somebody's going to take it out from under them, so they're going to stay there even if it blows. They're at this point where they're interviewing these guys because everybody else left. Okay, we're starting to see the acceleration. I'm hoping that it's still a relatively stable ride to the stellar activation cycle that we've always been trying for from the beginning. But I do know it has something to do with our ability to build these Merkabahs and help the planet to build these Merkabas. There's more that we're going to talk about tomorrow that has to do with land entrustments, which are pre-birth agreements that humans and indigos came in with, particularly indigos, but some humans as well, that if it got to this point, if the red button was pushed, which was the turnstiles, certain of us agreed to bring certain parts of the grids through, where through our Merkaba connection, we would be able to create kind of like arcs, like Noah's arcs, where certain parts of the grids we would be able to hold by the strength of our own fields. It's like promising Mother Earth, Terra Gaia, that we would get this piece of her through. The parts of the grids that hold a minimum of 30% of their natural D12 template can be arced out, can be plugged in to the primal light sound fields of the God worlds. The reason they show us the God world maps is they want us to start to understand what level of frequency needs to be opened here now. Before, the level of frequency that they were going to open was the Akasha level. Now, if you remember, we have our 7 lower and higher heavens and the Vekas. Then you have the Eka, which would be the inner line, and then you have the Akasha, okay, with its gates. They were going to open before from the Akasha level. What has to be done now is full activation of the pillars, of the scepters. This means they're going to be running frequency from the Rushe core of the highest God world, the Akasha Ea, to create enough stabilizing frequency in the grids to hold this. There's a huge amount of frequency coming through. It's going to come through our bodies too. So that's why we're being taught to use the mathematical codes as rapidly as possible. And tomorrow we're going to get, and I was so glad I did this, we're going to get a bit of a reprieve. I know for a lot of us it's awkward, a lot of it like me, of trying to get the spin, the song, and the Surya, help me, all down at one time. And to think that, oh my God, I have to do this every day. How can I go hide? This is how it affects me anyway. It's just, with all the other stuff I have to do, like I'm going to try to trip myself through this, like maybe in 20 years I'll get good at this. It's like a coordination that unless you happen to be a dancer to begin with, it's a bit difficult to find sometimes. You guys are doing great with it. I see when you were doing it yesterday. There is a way that we can get the same effect with menial use of having to always do it physically. They're going to show us some of this. Probably, I think they're going to give us more on it tomorrow, and then in Paxos. Paxos is going to be where we have our grand finale, where we're clearing one of the crystal temple grids over there. It's one of the Q-site grids, just like this one is. And by the way, you guys who went this afternoon, you did about 90% of the work on activating and clearing this Q-site. This is Q-site 1, isn't it? The Cypress one? I think, yeah. So the work that you did spontaneously this afternoon, I was told we just, Mackay and Naz just have to run the last sequence of codes that have to do with the speaker DNA stuff. And we did what needed to be done here. I was thinking, well, do we have to go tomorrow? And they're saying, no. I said, well, I thought we had to do site work. I said, you did. And so I would like to thank you for doing that. But when we go to Paxos, that's when we're going to do a similar type thing, but we're going to use the Sangha Kamalatai and the Ahea Lihea and Uramanu codes to anchor them there. It's also where Ma'a decided would be the best place to take us on the Amente voyage. All right. And the Amente voyages, now this is because they have more of the grids over there, like more of them are Guardians secured. Right now we're helping the Guardians secure them over here, but they're mostly Drak over here, which is Phantom, which is better than Wisadak, but they're kind of, a little bit each. They didn't want to take us into that here. And in Paxos we'll go into the Amente journey, and these are fun. They're meditations that use imagery to get you in. And this is what it looks like when you go in. Like if you want to see a symbol code, look around you. This image that you see is the symbol code for the mathematical coordinate of this point in the scalar grids in the universe. So when you see images, it's called a crux code. Crux and Zeta code. Every little point in the scalar grid of the universe has an image translation. This is the image translation of this coordinate point in the hologram. Well, we'll be using visualizations that take us into the halls of Amenti and what they look like, into inner earth, into very specific places in inner earth. The images are what the places look like. They are also the crux codes, which are the crux and zeta codes, the coordinate codes for those places. When we begin to use these technologies, it's the beginning of bilocation, mental bilocation first. Your spiritual bodies are already raring to go. Next is the mind. If you don't get the mind to participate, the 3D mind, the ego, you're not going anywhere with the body, because the 3D ego and the emotional body stand between the physical body and the spiritual body. You have to take it all. Either that, or you'll have your spiritual body go in one direction, your mind's going to stay here, and the rest of you is going to go for a little walk down to Metatronic land. Because it's the physical and emotional bodies primarily that they have the Metatronic coding locked into, and a little bit of the lower D3 mind, and a little bit of the astral body. This is where they're like skipping frequencies and taking a part of this body and a part of that body, a part of this one, part of this one, and fusing them all together unnaturally. All right. So when we start our little journeys, there's also going to be a tape set sometime before too long that's reminiscent of Tangible Structure of the Soul, the original tape set, but easier. These will simply be meditations, you know, the kind of light, love, and clueless ones that are fun, where you don't worry about putting this and that and the other thing and moving that over here, where you go somewhere. But you're going to go, it's that you're literally going to be given the visuals of very specific mathematical codings that some of them, if you take them, they turn into, if you like took them and put them in their condensed form, that image would look like the Lihaya or the Ihaya or the Uremanu or some of the other ones as well. We're also going to be given an exercise on how to begin using the maps, because the maps are also codes that will begin activating mathematics. Right now we're on the crash course of getting Akasha Merkaba built before we even have our regular Merkaba built. You can do it, because when you build the Akasha Merkaba, it implies you're building and filling out the frequencies in the other one. So, let me see if there's anything else for tonight I need to touch on. I touched on some of the stuff that I was going to save for tomorrow, but only touched on, let's see. Yeah, back to the eyes. I always go on tangents halfway through. The little list of the eyes that are on the bottom of this, just to let you know what they are and where they are. But it's also, it'll give you, I forgot to write that last one in. The number 10 is the Eye of Osiris. That one got whited out by accident. Osiris, I believe. Right? Osiris. Yeah. Oh, one, okay. It's the Eye of Athena. Anubis. 3 is the Eye of Noah. It connects to gate 3 in Nohasa, which is Bermuda, where we're going. It used to be Nohasa, Atlantis. No, number 1 is Eye of Athena. Trapezium, Orion, and Mercury. Trapezium is in the sword, I believe, and it's also called Theta. It's a group of 4 stars that look like one until you look at them with high-power microscope telescopes. Okay. And we have 2 is the Eye of Anubis, and that's in Epsilon Eridanus and Venus. 3 is the Eye of Noah, the Eye of Nohasa. Athena. Okay. 4 is the Eye of Ra, which is in our Sun, Mars, and our Sun's twin. Our Sun has a twin planet, our star, that is directly connected to in density 2, and it's called Rabizod. It's Tara's sun. And it's actually a binary system, 2-star system. Number 5 is the Eye of Delphi. That's the one that we've been playing with here, and activating the emerald eyes to help heal. So it doesn't. So this particular eye doesn't begin its running the blue sword frequencies here. The eye of Delphi connects to, is the D5 one, and it connects to Alcyone and the Pleiades, which is Terra in density 2, and what used to be Maldak, which means the asteroid belt now. So it's literally a location in the asteroid belt. There is an eye floating around in the asteroid belt. Now, the sixth eye is a dual eye. They're called the eyes of Horus. You have the right eye of Horus and the left eye of Horus. The right eye of Horus is in Sirius B, connects to Sirius B. It also connects up through Nibiru on the galactic level, but that gets into the phantom connections, and I haven't listed all of those here. And then the left eye connects to Procyon, and they both connect into Jupiter in our system. Number 7 is the eye of Olympus. It's a D7 eye. It's in Arcturus and in Saturn. Number 8 is the eye of the dragon. It's a D8 Alnitak Orion, which is in Orion's belt, and in Uranus. Number 9 is the eye of Elohim. It's a D9 Meroc Andromeda eye, and it connects into a smaller eye in Neptune. Then number 10, that was whited out there, is the eye of Osiris. That's the D10 Lyra Vega eye, and there's a smaller one in Pluto. The D11, the 11th eye, is the eye of Merlin, and that connects into D11 Avion through D11 Avalon, the moon of Avion in Lyra, and it connects to our system through Chiron, which is that little planetoid thing that science has recently discovered floating around between Saturn and Uranus, I believe. And then at 11.5, you have the eye of Metatron, or the eye of Yahweh, that connects into Arimathus. Notice the Zeus on the Arimath. If you can look at this sheet, look at some of the words, and you'll start to get an idea of where the Olympian gods live. They weren't peoples, individuals. They're the names of planetary systems and stars that had to do with the Wesedeks. They're Wesedek civilizations, and they personified them as gods, just like they did with Jehovah and those kind of things. And Ahala, which became Allah here. We've all been affected, like nobody got away from it, got through clean on this one after Atlantis. It's sad, but it's true. But at least we're all equal. I mean, you can't say, "Aha, see, the Christians were right, but the Jews were wrong and the Muslims are wrong." We've all been suffering from this Metatronic virus mess, so we're all equal. But most of them don't want to look at it that way. They're too busy defending their own dogma because they don't know what else to do. And they've been taught hatred instead of love and of learning. We make a huge difference because the consciousness we bring in here, you might not be able to explain to the people in mainstream whatever society out there, but we're carrying it on the planet, which makes it potentially available to them as they start to grow. So we can help them that way. The more we know, the more knowledge this planet will hold. And it will be there for people as they grow and expand. So, anyway, I'll get back up to Arimathus at 11.5. That's the Arimathea wormhole, path of Arimathea that used to be an evolutionary path to Christendom, and now it no longer is. It's connected to Charon, Pluto's moon, in our matrix. So, there are the eyes of Metatron. And the hearts, we only have the galactic levels yet, because technically they're between like this point and that point, and we have to find out what they are. But The first, I'll do the fourth one, because everyone but the first one is activated. The fourth heart of Metatron is the D10.75. It's between Pluto and Nibiru. Okay, now Nibiru's original orbit, you can see on that other thing, that other diagram, was the outer orbit on this diagram, out and through here, the dotted line, out in this one. If you can actually find it easiest by looking at the horizontal Cathara grid, and Nibiru had been gate 12, so just follow the oval that goes off gate 12. Over here, sorry, gate 12, over here. If you can follow the oval that goes down off that, that'll give you Nibiru's old orbit, and if you follow the 11, that gives you Charon's old orbit. So right now, the place that the heart is located is between Pluto's orbit and what used to be Nibiru's orbit. It's Charon's old orbit. The third eye is the D7.75 eye. It's located in our galaxy between Saturn and Uranus, so it connects through Chiron. And the one above it, the 10.751 between Pluto and Nibiru, connects through Charon. So Chiron and Charon are both anchoring the hearts as well as the eyes of Metatron. The D4.75 heart connects, it's between Mars and the asteroid belt. It's like a space. If you took the space between those two spaces, it would be halfway between, it would be past Mars. And I do believe that places it, I believe it places it in one of Mars' outer moons. They haven't gotten that specific yet, but I get the feeling that it's one of Mars' moons. Then the one that is not activated yet, that they want to activate, that they're trying to activate now, is the D1.75 heart, and it's positioned between Mercury and Venus. So I wouldn't doubt it if it's one of the moons of Mercury or Venus. When they get into more detail, we'll get exactly where they're located. Not that it really matters. I mean, we have detail. We have detail coming out our eyeballs. How much detail do we need before we've proved to ourselves that this is happening and something needs to be done? And this is what the Guardians are faced with. They'll give us enough detail for it to make sense. Right now, you could write, like 20 books on just the stuff we've talked about tonight. There'll be time for detail, hopefully, later, like more detail. I mean, we have quite a lot already. When you combine the stuff in the last 3 years it's been given, my head's spinning as it's like, there's never a break. There's never a let up. It's always the next level. I'm giving a workshop, and it's coming through as the workshop's being given, 20 minutes before, back it up for an hour because there's more coming through. We have enough detail to get an idea of what's happening. Tomorrow's workshop will bring us to a point where we see what needs to be done about that. What does this thing, great, Nibiru's coming through at an angle to ricochet around the sun? Oh, joy. What does that mean? What are we going to see? These are my questions, and I'm sure, they would be yours too after being exposed to this, level of knowledge. It's like when they gave this information to me off the plates, a lot of this is plate stuff, like the maps and how the beast works and all that. That's recorded in the plate, so it's very technical digital data, and they're helping me downstep it. But they're wait, excuse me a minute. Ma'a's here. Ma'a is he's the main speaker for the Iani, the Inner Earth Iani. Okay. All right. Ma'a is saying, for tonight, do you like me to pass this on? He said, tell them that tomorrow night we'll have for them what we call the golden key. So not to fret and be overly worried about the information that you've received tonight. He said, we will not underestimate the situation for you and thereby mislead you. so that you allow yourself to be unprepared. But we will, however, provide you with a trump card or two. You could say it's a trick you kept what? A trick that each of you kept up your cosmic sleeves for a very, very long time. And tomorrow we will begin the revelation of this trick. He's saying, we do not want you to go away this evening feeling fearful or frightened or that doom is approaching. He said, he's quoting something that I had said. He's bouncing it back to me. He's saying, we may indeed rock, but we will do our best to ensure that we do not roll. But in the event, oh, come on, you're kidding me. You're going to use that. Yeah. So in the event that we end up playing cosmic bowling, you will not need worry, because you will have your magic flying machines. And he's using a reference that I don't know if you guys have heard. Some of you probably have heard of it, but in my generation, it was a silly kid thing that was like a drama on TV. Anybody ever see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? You know, it went in water, it went on the sky. He's using these analogies to, he's trying to show his humor with us here. Basically saying that is enough for tonight. If I want to talk about a bit, I could do it tonight or tomorrow about Joseph of Arimathea, which is simply this. I'll leave this up to you guys. There's a piece of the history, that has to do with what are called the Leviathan Atlantean king lines, and how they came up from Atlantis, and in through the Christ period and the Christ story and those kind of things, and how the Templar quest and this Arimathea agenda that started way before Atlantis was a part of Atlantis and moved up through into our Christ drama and into the distortions in the Christian holy books, and it started to be spread like through our contemporary times. That's there too. Would you rather me do that tomorrow night? Because okay. What I'll try to do, I'm seeing some nods, yes. Please. Okay. Now, what I'll try to do, and I can't guarantee I can do it yet, because the thing is, it's going to take forever. I have a genealogy chart. Actually, there's two. One that takes it from the original fall down through all sorts of galactic, intergalactic systems. I won't even touch that one for now. And then there's one that plugs into that, as far as the races that ended up as the fallen angelics raiding here that got involved with the Leviathans, that takes it down through the primary Leviathan races and their Atlantean king line races and what ones they crossed with here. I don't think it's one of those that kept growing on the table with a bunch of taped together sheets. I think it's about that tall when I unravel it. But so at some point we were thinking we were going to do like a poster of it, because you'd have to use microscopic writing to try to get it anywhere near. You'd have to do it in sections. There's no way to. But I can at least bring the scroll and kind of hold up and point and say, this, and explain some of them to you and show you some of the things if we do that tomorrow. If not, I'll just do it I can do part of it off the top of my head, the most important parts. But it'd probably be more fun to see it anyway, to see. Yeah, and that's where we get like the Abraham line and all sorts of interesting Grail and anti-Grail lines running around here. So I guess we'll save that for tomorrow. What time is it?
12:30.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad. Is there anything vital that needs to be covered that we didn't touch on? Let me make sure. Okay, so we can do Arimathea tomorrow. All right. Just in closing, I just want to recap, and I know you have eyeballs so you can read it yourself, but I wanted to say this, just to read some of the names of the Wisadek planets or stars that the beast is plugged into. We have Aramath, Zeus. This is where Zeus comes from. This is where Aramat and Zeus comes from. So here we go. We're beginning our Olympian gods here. Now, we have one that I didn't even realize it was in Greek mythology until I tripped over it somewhere. But I've known it as a book of some very twisted teachings. It's called Urantia.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
The thought adjusters people.
Yes, they're the thought adjuster people. Yes, you follow the Urantia book and you'll have a really nice trip, get your thoughts adjusted, and you'll end up on reverse number 4 in Vishuddha called Marantia. Yes, now, before we get there, now their matrix is reversed and reversed. It's like a double reversal, where if you look at our gates, they run number 1, D1 at the bottom, up to number 12 at the top, right? And you'll also notice that our 3, 6, 9 side of the Kathara grid, our 3, 6, 9 side is over here. Okay? It's on this side. I mean, just remember our Kathara grid, how we teach Kathara, right? You have the 3, 6, 9 running up that side. And technically, that's this side of your body, right? Which gets you dyslexic, because you're looking at it this way, and it's actually the opposite. You have to wear it. All right. Now, the Phantom Matrix still runs from 1, like R1 is down, up to 11. But where our 3, 6, 9 is, they have their 4, 7, 10. So they're reversed that way. The other one is reversed that way and that way. So where we have our 11, they have their 1 gate. So it's like a double reversal. So at 11.5 is where they have Aramatsus that plugs into the eye of Metatron at 11.5. From there, that's their 0 point. They consider Aramath their 0 point at the 11.5, plugging into the Metatron eye. Then number 1 reversed, which is their number 1 gate, would be your Urantia. Number 2 is Herculon. It's not spelled Herculon like it is here, but it's Herculon. And it was funny because these came through. I didn't even know there was a place called Herculon. And it shows up on the itinerary for the trip. I said, oh, cool, look at this. It's spelled different, but how do you say that? And it sounds very similar. But this is where your legendary Hercules comes from and all of that. Then number 3 reversed is Osirion. This is where all the Egyptian stuff, the Osiris stuff. Then number 4 is Marantia. And you know, when I saw that in the Urantia teachings, I remember thinking, the last place I would ever want to ascend to is Morantia. Why would I want to be in a place of morons? Because Tia tends to refer to, like, you know, it's used on different things of like being of, or place of, or being of. Morantia is of morons. I mean, I just remember seeing that and thinking, I don't think that's before I knew where they fit. You know, because for a while here it's been like, you know, I can be like Love and Clueless. I loved everybody. I figured, everybody has something good to teach. I had no idea the level of infiltration that was being done on this planet. I was devastated when I found out. So I thought I was going to be a part of the New Age movement. They were going to like me, and we were supposed to get along with each other. You know, so much for that idea. Unfortunately, I got tough quick. You know. Anyway, we got number 5. It's Artissima, and this is where you get Artemis. Okay. We had, and there's this one has actually, some of these have like 2 or 3 clusters of stars or planets that they're all linked through together, where they had to literally link a couple together to get the grid power to form 1 gate. So these are the names of the main gates. And this one, and this is a riot, because it's funny how I'm not well researched in written stuff that's here. I don't go research in other people's books. Things come across just like drift across me. Somebody sent me once a Keys of Enoch book, and I looked at like 3 pages. Somebody else sent me a Urantia book. No, they left it at my house. And I saw it. I never read it. I just saw it. So the word, okay, wait a minute. We have one of those words somewhere in our stuff. But this word was kind of interesting because it didn't register until I read Revelation again. And this is the number 6 reverse. That's one of the 3 of the 666s. It's called Apollyon. It's kind of interesting that we're in the Lewis of Apollia. How do you pronounce it? our hotel.
In addition to that, there is a school of intellectual, spiritual people who say that Apollonius
Yes.
is the true Christ.
Is the what?
The true Christ.
Oh.
Of the three that were born.
Okay. Yeah. The Apollonius connection. Apollo, Apollonius. Apollyon is also the name of, they said in Greek it's Apollyon, and in Hebrew it's Abaddon, which is the name of the devil in the Bible. That's because the main translations of the Bible were done, like the main hijack of the Bible, were done by a group of Jehovah and Anunnaki and Elohim that didn't want to go to Isadak. So they've been pointing fingers at each other all over the place. It's kind of nice because it's that same group of Jehovah and Elohim that they don't want to join Emerald Covenant. They still have their issues with the founders, but they do not want to be assimilated. So they are going to, in the Bermuda trip is the beginning of this, they are going to turn over the Eye of Elohim that they have been guarding. That's the one that's in D9 Meroc Andromeda, and that connects to Neptune. They're going to turn it over so the Guardians can run the D12 frequency through it, which will begin to break up the cube matrix. That's going to be good for the life field, but it's going to be very traumatic for the beings of Wisadek, because they're going to find anything they stole from other people, it goes back to where it came from. So if they built a body on sucking the life force off another form, they will find their consciousness fragmenting into clumps or clouds that don't have the forms. They will lose their immortal forms if they have fully plugged in, to the Metatronic thing. So we're in the middle of amazing times. Anyway, number 7 is Olympion. And they consider that kind of the center of their universe, like their galactic core, D7, their D7. Olympeon. Olympion. Number 8 is called Uvrasa. It's hard to pronounce. Uvrsa. I still can't pronounce that one right. It's Uvrsa, and there's like a long part after that, but that's kind of like the short word for it. Number 9 is called Nubanti. Number 10 is Anubion. This is where the whole Anubis thing comes from. And number 11 is it's Athena comes off of this is Atheanon. So this is basically, and now if you look at these, each of them these are like the primary stars that they link through, their primary gates. They have their own star systems built around them. And this is where you get all the gods, and like everybody, how in the Greek mythology and Roman mythology, everybody's sleeping with everybody else. And Zeus had, I think, a daughter, was it his daughter, that popped out of his head hole? And became Athena. There's all these really bizarre things that happen. When you start to read those mythologies in terms of understanding them as dynamics of the beast that have been done through, literally you're talking about planets and stars and stargates, so you call one Apollo, and Apollo had a date with so-and-so, right? Well, it probably means they linked, okay? These stories can be translated in terms of the frequency realities that are taking place with the beast system and the eyes and the hearts of Metatron. So anyway, that's enough for now. I'll see if I can fine-tune this. I'm going to fine-tune this for tomorrow, because the little squiggly stuff you probably see at the bottom of this one that probably makes no sense right now. See how it can over here on this one? Yeah, the shadowy stuff that's all squiggly, it probably makes no sense. Well, I did it once, and I can probably get it again. It belongs on here, and I'll try to have it done for tomorrow. This is going to show the basic torque that they're trying to create, how with the movement of one axis and the movement of the other, that they're planning to merge the three of them. And then down in the blank spot, there's supposed to be another part that shows how they're planning to rip our time matrix here off of its primal light field, which would be its D13 through a Katic grid going up, and literally flip it over, end upside down, and fuse it with theirs. The thing down here that looks like a bumblebee, if you look at it, interesting that bumblebee was one of the signs of Rome and a few other things. It was a popular sign. You'll even find it on stuff in here. It was in the Greek and the Roman paradigms. You'll also notice there are three. Now this is the cube matrix, right up there. You notice there are three circles that are highlighted in white there, just so you can see them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you take this over here and put another circle around it, that is technically the, I think they call that, there's the egg of life, this the seed of life, I believe, the 7. What it should have is 15 spheres connected together, but it takes the inner 7 out and harnesses them in an electrostatic field. These are the 7 heads of the beast. They are the 7 universes of the Metatronic field. So this is what all that means. So there'll be more to come tomorrow, and I have a feeling we're going to have some surprises tomorrow. But I do know it's the feeling behind all of it is, yes, it's serious, but it's not serious where you go freak out about it. It's serious where you say, okay, yeah, it's probably a good thing to like get my Merkaba together, and I don't know. I will know by tomorrow. I don't know what we're going to be asked to do to help. We were doing round tables, but at this point, the round tables open things up for so much infiltration by the Nephilim people, the ones being directed by Nephilim, that you never know which side it's going to end up on. So sometimes we'll be asked to do rounds, but for very specific reasons. We're not going for quantity anymore. It doesn't matter now what quantity. But it will help in certain areas. But what they're doing mainly are salutations, using the tones and the new codes, using the Veka codes, and progressively we'll go into the Akasha codes. So it's simpler, and we'll be able to begin doing these with our minds as meditation journeys, as well as having to trip over ourselves, learning how to spin and all that. It helps to anchor it in the body when you move it physically. To get your Merkaba originally going in the right spin, you need to do it physically. But there comes a time when if you do it enough like that, you don't have to do it physically every day. You don't have to do it all the time. You can do it mentally as a meditation, and once you've set the pattern in the body, doing it in the mind will activate it. So we don't always have to be tripping over ourselves and doing spins if we don't want to do spins and that kind of thing. It's just the initial getting it into the cellular memory on D1, physical body level. So that's kind of probably oh, good. It is for me anyway. Dear Lord. Anyway, I think that's the end of tonight's workshop. I hope it was worth staying up for. Sorry to keep you up too late if I have. Okay. I should probably do questions tomorrow night. Yeah. Because we all have a million questions right now, including us. Sure.
I didn't catch follow-up number 1. I got
I'll share my notes with you.
I have Athena.
And then
It's D1, Trapezium Orion.
What's the planet?
Mercury. Yeah. It's a 4-star cluster in Orion's sword, I believe. Well, good night, y'all. That's the one thing I picked up by living in Florida was y'all. Is this on? The sound's on? Okay. Well, where do I want to start? All right. It's going to be an interesting evening, I'm sure, because I have no idea, no clue whatsoever what's going to be given to us by the Iani. But they would like to know that we're around. They'd also like to know that if any of you feel like a fuzzy presence in the back of your right shoulder at any time during the evening, don't get scared. They're just saying hello. Now, when we're dealing with the Iani, they are actually they're in all of the, in our Eka maps, how we have the Eka that's part of our Veka system, which is the first lower God world, and then you have that inner path all the way up, the path of the middle pillars, that the Iani are of those reality systems. They are the primary inhabitants of those reality systems. So when we're dealing with the Iani, you don't have to worry about things like field implantation and them doing anything with you or to you without your permission, because they will let themselves be known. That's why when they're around, I'm asked to let you know that they're around. Now, we always do our Maharic seal anyway, because there's other things that are around too that aren't invited. You know? But as long as we have the Maharic seal up, those things can't interface with our fields, particularly when we're in a group. When we're in a group of people that are working with the D12 and higher frequencies, we're in a very protected space, because there's an amplification effect that takes place between the numbers of people involved. And the more people you have in a room or in a space that have those frequencies activated, it will amplify everybody else's activation. You'll amplify each other just by being in the same room with each other. This is part of the reason why sometimes the Iani will join us, because them downstepping some of their frequencies, what they'll do is an astral body projection, which is some of the things we're going to play with on Paxos, and maybe a couple other times. I don't know if we'll get into that on the ferry or not. But it's simply like, imagine that you have an astral image of yourself, which from this level would look like an electrical imprint of yourself. It looks like you, but it's three-dimensional, but in a way that like a ghost would be, where you could like put your hand through it kind of thing. We call it the ghost body. We all have one. Well, we're fully able, and part of the contact training and things as we move forward with the Iani training is going to teach us how to begin moving that body around consciously and keeping track of ourselves and our body and sending it on missions and those kind of things. The Iani are masters of this type of projection. They can project literally, depending on which level they're coming from. Some of them can project millions of themselves and literally send a piece of themselves to talk to 1 million people at once and say different things to each one. You know? So when the Iani join us, they are sending a projection of themselves into the astral field in our world. And that is helping to amplify the frequencies in the group as well, just having that field around us. It's almost like the scalar waves that compose dimension 4 get stimulated and activated a little higher, where they're oscillating faster. And that oscillation downsteps, and it makes the frequencies down here oscillate a little faster. So a lot of times they will come in, not even to say anything, just to be present and be with us to help the group hold higher frequency. They'll do this very often if we're in a situation where there's any potential astral interference or higher interference coming our way, where it helps to create a protection field. They don't per se protect us. They simply hold a frequency field that allows our own ability to protect ourselves to be amplified. So I get the feeling that part of the reason they're with us tonight is for that reason, because there are certain energies that are aware that we're here. And we're dealing very heavily in this area with the Knights Malta people, which were a draconian branch. They were out of the Omicron draconian races, and a particular branch of them were out of the Weesadex that hybridized with the Omicron draconian. And they're kind of like the big nasty dracs, you know, the ones that they're really not nice to deal with. So there is that presence. They told me as soon as we arrived in Cyprus, they're aware of you, they know you're here, you know, that kind of thing. But we haven't had any interference. We haven't had any feeling that anything was, you know, trying to mess with us. And that's primarily because everybody's been running very high frequency, and where it wasn't where it wasn't high enough, the Iani were making up the difference for us. So they're going to give us something tonight, probably towards the end, knowing them, that has to do with, after the things we talk about, what does this mean? What are we looking at in the next 2 years, 3 years, 10 years? Because the things they're talking about now in relation to the drama and what's taking place in the contemporary drama is more than they would have liked to had to talk about. If things had gone well, and Plan A, which was fix it, Plan A was the fix it plan. Simply get the grid straightened out, and the Anunnaki races and the Anu Elohim were supposed to kind of help us so the Draconians didn't get control. There's a whole drama that went down between the competing groups of the Draconian races and the Anunnaki Anu Elohim races, where the Draconians got such a foothold in here, the Anunnaki races and the Anu Elohim were afraid that they were going to lose the game. So that's when they decided to enter agreements with the Emerald Covenant races, that okay, we'll join forces since we're going to lose anyway, And then they used that opportunity once they had joined and given lip service, basically, to being a part of the Emerald Covenant. They had used the advantages that gave them, which was access to other grids and those kind of things, to once they had sufficiently got more control over the grids than the Draconians had by combining them with ours, they then turned around and began using their grid power to override the Guardians' grid power, and went off on their own tangent. The drama in the last 3 years has moved so quickly, it's slightly mind-boggling from my perspective, because, well, Az and I, and now Mac, are in a position where we're supposed to be speakers, which means we're supposed to know what's happening and be able to share it with other people, and things happen so quickly. By the time you get 20 pages on the first event down, something else has already happened, so it's like put that in a drawer and get to the next level. This is why the workshops progressively are getting more very spontaneous, as far as written work and those kind of things. I apologize, but at the same time, I don't think I need to, because I know that I'm working my hardest to bring to you the state-of-the-art information. I'm not teaching you old stuff. In fact, sometimes I'm teaching you stuff that's not born yet, because like tonight. Right? So, as we move along, do they have these now? Did they get handed? We have them in. They didn't get them yet, though. Okay, could we get somebody to hand them out?
History of grids.
I'm going to do the history, but I'd like for them to have these. Like, while we go. Yeah. Okay. Now, you're going to get 4 pages tonight, and they'll look similar to pages you've had from the Dance For program, but there's different information on them. The 2 that look like this, when you get them, these we'll talk about a little later, and the other 2, some of you probably already have, if you have the Templar book or a couple other, it's in several things. But these are the progression of the Atlantean conspiracy list and the creation of the Leviathan force and related history. I'm handing these out just in case some of you don't have them and never saw them before. It gives you a really quick rundown of the series of events that have taken place basically since humanity was seated in this system, which was the parallel Earth system first. The most important thing about this is we can begin to see the progression of events that's led up to this drama, and this is where this fits in. Okay? And this genealogy chart, on its way to being a genealogy chart thing, has to do with what we're going to speak about tonight, which is, now in the itinerary it was worded as discover how Atlantis is rising today. Discover where Metatronics is fitting in today. We talked about Metatronics last night. We talked about the history that started way back 950 billion years ago, then 250 billion years ago, the war, then 570 million years ago when the Wesodex broke into this matrix, etc. So we've got the history, and now at least we understand that even though Metatronic science and things related to it have a seeming history here, a recent history, that people seem to think they're good sciences. They seem to think that they're the God sciences. When you take history back to where this stuff originally came from, we begin to understand now that the Metatronic movement that's being brought back here in our times right now is a deception. And it's a deception that is intended to create something that would be technically a new creation. When we get into tonight's material on the 3 paths of Genesis, Genesis, in the beginning God created. In the beginning somebody created. Well, in the beginning God created. Now we have other things creating as well. Now we all create every time we think a thought. The 3 paths of Genesis have to do with what is taking place right now with the realities of our Metatronic history and the 3 options of evolution that the species on this planet and in this time matrix from D11 down are moving into. It becomes important and when we begin to understand what we're a part of right now. We're a small collective of people that when we start talking about what we know, most people don't want to hear it. And that's okay. That's their choice. But we are a part of something huge. We're a part of a regenesis of a species. If it wasn't for the work that's being done now with the guardian races and the Eoni races and the bringing back of the Emerald Covenant, the angelic human race and the indigo guardian race would cease to exist as they were originally created, because they have been mutated to a point where you can, just like you need 30% of your original divine blueprint to be able to regenerate it, regenerate the rest. Our races on this planet and in other systems in this time matrix are precariously close to the point of no return, where there's so much distortion in the templates, there's not 30% left for regenesis. There are going to be new races, a new race line created from the beings that live on this planet right now. Many of them are going to take up residence in the Wisadek matrix. It is a Metatronic race. This was not originally part of our divine blueprint. It was a creation that in many ways is unfortunate. The decision that I spoke about last night when the founders were trying to decide what do you do with the mess of the Phantom Matrix, there was a risk taken. The risk was known even then, that if the ones from that fallen matrix got hooked up with the ones from the other fallen matrix, there could be a nightmare. And that is the probability that the consciousness in our time matrix, the probability that they have seen. We're in the process of getting our whole time matrix back into its heroic probability. Its heroic probability means where it is back in line with its original divine blueprint and its intentions for being, and Source's intentions for its creation. But in that process, it implies that things that weren't a part of the original divine blueprint will no longer be in the same space as the things that are realigned into the divine blueprint. So there's a separation that's occurring, and it is a separation that, in terms of our experience of certain groups or certain parts of the planet or certain associations, it will be a permanent separation where new worlds will be created, new systems, new galaxies will be created because of what is taking place now. In terms of simultaneous time, all this has already taken place somewhere. And it's from that somewhere that there are races that look back and remember their history, and they remember being a part of this particular time frame. The Eoni races are those races. They are both our incarnates of the future and our incarnates of the past. The people here on this planet have their part of their incarnations in the inner earth time frames, in the inner lineup, as far as the Eka and then the higher levels of the inner worlds. Not everyone has a full counterpart there, a full incarnation there. All indigos do. Indigos 1 and 2s. Indigo 3s, if for those of you who've heard me speak about the indigo children, indigo 1s are the ones with, I think, 37 to 48 DNA strands. Indigo 2s are the ones with 24 to 36 strand templates. And indigo 3s are a hybrid experiment that was done to try to assist we should be shot for this one, try to assist the Nephilim races that supposedly had wanted to come over into the Emerald Covenant. It was a bioregenesis attempt. And right now you have a lot of indigo 3s running around on the planet. What they have are two souls. They have an Orophim indigo soul, which is the original human imprint soul, and that's supposed to be the more powerful one, that has more frequency than the one it will adopt. And in the same body, they have a Nephilim soul. They're very polarized because of this. So most of their life frame is simply about balancing in their DNA these polarities within themselves, as the Orophim part teaches the Nephilim part how to conduct itself in ways that don't violate other beings and other things. And there's many of those children and adults around on the planet right now. Unfortunately for the indigo 3s, because the Palladian-Syrian agreements were broken, the ones that were made in 1992 were broken, and the Anunnaki defected from the Emerald Covenant, they're now going into a major body snatch mode, where they are assisting the Nephilim in those bodies to push out the Orophim, to put it into dimensional suspension and literally possess the bodies. And there's a race called the Magentas that are being created from this. The Magentas have to do with the Ruby Order, which is the name, just like we're the Emerald Order, and you have the Amethyst Order, which are the Brahmarama, and you have the Gold Order, Seraphi. The Ruby Order were the original ones of the Iothe-Vodeh host matrix before it fell. They were the ones of the Anu Elohim that had, Metatron was a part of their collective, Giovanni was a part of their collective, and they were supposed to be responsible for assisting their fallen ones to evolve back into the Emerald Covenant and back into Ascendant Mastery. But because Metatron went down and Giovanni went down, the Ruby Order is now, they play Masters of the Universe here and wherever. They're the ones that hooked up with the Wesedex. And the Magentas right now are children who had two souls, and their Orifeme has been bounced out, basically. So there's a lot of Orifeme souls that are getting trapped down here because of that. They're getting trapped in the dimensional frequency bands because they've been displaced from their body patterns, while you have these other forces, the Nephilim soul taking over. And it might have been a good Nephilim soul to begin with, where it was a Nephilim soul that really wanted to enter the Emerald Covenant. It really wanted to, evolve. And because of its DNA coding, the Nephilim DNA coding, it has open windows to the fallen angelic collectives of the Ruby Order. So they come in and they direct it like a puppet. This is part of what we're watching. People that go to certain workshops of names of individuals I don't need to name are getting implanted, and the Metatronic coding of the fire sword initiations are being given to facilitate this process. This is very sad, because there are a race of beings being created alone just from that bioregenesis attempt that were never intended to be created, and there's a large amount of them on the planet right now. They're being prepared to serve as the foot soldiers and the vehicles for the fallen angelics in the unraveling of what's called their script. Now we'll talk about a script. It was a script that was written and encoded, a digital program of events that would direct events. It was a digital program that was created in Atlantis. In Atlantis, there were several stages of the fall. The first major one in our seeding being 25,500 BC, when the Nibiru Dadic crystal grid was put in at Stonehenge, which linked Earth to Wormwood, the battle star, and linked that to Nibiru. So literally, we talked about radio body, the radio body capsule that we all have personally and that the planet has. There began to be an interface through the system of the radial body of Nibiru in Phantom Matrix and our radial body on a planetary level. That means the history and the memory banks of Nibiru were being seeded in electronically into here. If you can imagine that creation physics works in a much more advanced way, but in a similar way to creating, say, a virtual reality program, where there's a programmer that creates a mathematical language program, and that program, once it's plugged into the apparatus, will create a thing on a screen where you can have, a domain experience. Our reality fields are like that. We create holograms. It's part of the natural structure of creation. And because it is all digitally encoded through the mathematics of the scalar wave patterns that form the cosmic grids all the way down to the, microcosm, these mathematics can be altered and reprogrammed. What's very eerie is we can compare what's happening right now and what's been happening since 25,500 BC to the Matrix movie. I don't know how many of you have seen the Matrix movie, but I couldn't sit through the whole thing. It had a certain point I had to get up and get out of it because it was so close to the reality, and I didn't really realize it until I saw there's, oh my God, get me out of here, I went back and then finished watching the end of it, but it was like, oh yeah. This is like a little joke, take the blue pill or the red pill. Well, the Archangel Michael ones are taking whatever pill it was that kept you in the hologram, kept you stuck. There were a series of events in Atlantis that were programmed into the grids here to occur at the occurrence of the next stellar activation cycle. They were actually programmed in between 25,500 BC and 22,326 BC. All of this was supposed to go down in 22,326 BC. That was the next stellar activation cycle that they were planning for. That ended up in a stalemate, and everybody had to sit on their technologies until the next stellar activation cycle. Now, the program that was run had to do with mobilizing the little players, or the domain personalities, which they looked at as us, the people running around down here on the planet. We became like their little operatives. Let's say you had a little man that you're going to make run around with your little controls, right? If you were playing a video game. Well, this is how the fallen angelics have looked at this place, and they had a plan for how to mobilize certain forces of their little virtual reality people, which were us down here, into creating a certain scenario. And their scenario primarily had to do with... Hello? What is that? Oh, okay.